What if I told you that ancient Egypt was more than pyramids and mummies, that hidden in its sands are stories of lost gods, strange inventions, and rituals that shaped the world we live in today? Tonight, we uncover some mysteries that refuse to be forgotten. From locks and clocks to magic, power, and eternal life, this is the Egypt you've never seen before. Stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe, because once you enter these stories, you won't want to leave. The wooden lock and key. The Nile is quiet tonight. The river moves like liquid silver beneath the moon. A soft breeze drifts through the reeds, carrying the scent of water and earth. The desert is still, except for the whisper of sand shifting in the distance. Egypt breathes. And in that breath, a story waits. Not a story of pyramids, not a story of golden masks, but of something smaller, something hidden, something so ordinary you might pass it by without notice. A door, wooden, plain, standing in the courtyard of a home. And upon that door rests a secret that changed the world. The wooden lock, the wooden key. At first glance it looks simple, a carved wooden box, fitted to the door, pins hidden inside, waiting to be lifted, a key shaped like a puzzle, sliding into the chamber. Simple, ordinary, but sometimes the simplest things carry the deepest magic. Listen, click. That is the sound of the very first lock in human history. A sound so small, yet so mighty, that we still hear it today, every time we turn a key, every time a door closes behind us. Before this invention, the world was open. Doors were just barriers of wood or reed. Anyone could push them aside. Grain could be stolen, beer could be taken, secrets could be discovered. Imagine the unease of living in such a world, to sleep at night, not knowing if your food will be there at dawn, to hold treasures, yet never truly keep them, to write prayers, yet never know if prying eyes would read them. The lock was not just a tool, it was peace of mind, it was safety carved in wood, it was trust, made mechanical. Picture a farmer. The sun has set, the fields are quiet, he returns from his work, arms heavy with bundles of wheat, sweat clings to his brow, his sandals coated with dust. Inside his mud brick home, he places his harvest, he slides the bolt, he hears the click, and for the first time in human history, he sleeps without fear. Picture a merchant. The market of Thebes buzzes behind him. He has traded beads, linen, spices from distant lands. The smells of incense and roasting bread still cling to his robes. He enters his chamber, places his goods in a wooden chest, slides the key, turns it with care. The lock clicks shut. His wealth is safe. Picture a priest. Within the cool stone halls of a temple, papyrus scrolls rest, records of offerings, prayers to the gods, secrets of the stars. He closes the temple doors, secures them with a wooden lock. The key is his alone. What is sacred remains sacred. What is hidden remains hidden. Now picture a thief. The moon is bright, the village asleep. He creeps toward a house, thinking of the bread, the beer, the grain that might be inside. He pulls at the door, but the door does not yield. He pushes again, harder. Still, it will not move. He does not know of pins, of keys, of hidden puzzles inside the wood. The house remains sealed. For the first time, theft meets resistance. Click, the sound of failure for him, the sound of safety for the family inside. The lock is not just wood, it is trust given form. It is the human desire to keep, to guard, to protect. It is the line between mine and yours. Isn't it curious that we do not marvel at this invention the way we marvel at pyramids? The pyramids rise against the sky, impossible to ignore, but the lock is small, silent, humble, yet without it civilization itself would feel different. Think of today, your home, your car, your phone. Every lock you turn, every door you close, it carries the spirit of Egypt's wooden key. Click, the same sound, across millennia, across empires, across every age of human history. Let us pause here. Let us imagine the workshop where the first lock was born. A carpenter sits beneath the shade of a palm. Wood shavings curl at his feet. His hands are steady, his knife sharp. He cuts pins from acacia wood, smooth and round. He hollows a chamber into the lock, fitting each pin in place. He carves a key, long and flat, its teeth shaped to lift the pins just so. Hours pass. The sun drifts west. The Nile glows with fire. At last he slides the key inside. The pins rise. The bolt moves. Click. The door is sealed. He does not know it yet, but he has given humanity one of its most enduring gifts. Years pass. Generations come and go. The lock spreads across villages, then cities, then empires. It guards the grain of the farmer. It guards the trade of the merchant. It guards the prayers of the priest. It guards the secrets of kings. It becomes so ordinary that people forget it had a beginning. They forget the carpenter by the Nile. They forget the first time a door truly stayed shut. But the lock remembers. Every click is a memory. Every key is a whisper of that first design. And you, tonight, drifting into sleep, are part of that memory too. When you closed your door, when you locked it, you echoed the same sound heard 5,000 years ago. Click, the sound of safety. Click, the sound of secrecy. Click, the sound of trust. It is the heartbeat of civilization. It is the breath of privacy. It is the rhythm of rest. So close your eyes. Hear the river. Feel the desert wind. See the simple wooden door, and listen once more. Click. The lock turns, the key slides free, and history, in all its grandeur, rests quietly behind it. Measuring the land. The first surveyors. The Nile rises, the Nile falls. Every year the same rhythm: flood, retreat, renewal. The waters cover the fields, spreading dark, fertile silt across the valley. It is a gift, but it is also a problem. For when the waters finally sink back, the fields do not look the same. The edges blur, the lines vanish. What was once your land might now appear to be your neighbor's. And in a world where harvest means survival, who can afford to lose even a strip of soil? This is where the Egyptians gave us something remarkable, something quiet, something invisible, yet powerful. They gave us the surveyor, the measurer of land, the first to draw invisible lines upon the earth. Imagine this scene. The flood has just ended. The Nile has pulled back into its channel, leaving the valley glistening with fresh mud. Farmers walk along the softened ground, pointing, arguing, gesturing. This was my boundary, one insists. No, the water has shifted it, another replies. Voices rise, tension brews, but then, figures appear on the horizon. They do not carry baskets, they do not bring plows, they bring tools: a rope, carefully knotted, a plumb line, a simple wooden rod. Surveyors, keepers of order, children of geometry before geometry even had a name. They stretch the rope across the field, knot to knot, a measure as steady as the stars. They drop the plumb line, watching it hang straight, true against the pull of the earth. They plant their rod into the soil, marking corners, tracing boundaries unseen by the eye, and when they finish, the farmer's land is clear once more. One strip here, another strip there. The line is drawn, the dispute is gone. The field belongs to him, as it did before, not because he says so, not because he argues so, but because the surveyor has measured it, and measurement does not lie. Think of that for a moment. The Egyptians invented not just a way to grow food, not just a way to count days, but a way to make fairness visible. Measurement, proof, geometry made practical. Isn't that beautiful? Now imagine walking with one of these surveyors. The sun is hot, the ground soft beneath your sandals. The rope feels rough in your hands, the knots carefully spaced. You stretch it across the field, steady, deliberate. You feel the plumb line sway against the breeze, then settle, perfectly vertical. You press the rod into the earth, marking the point. Step by step, you carve order into the land. Not with walls, not with fences, but with invisible lines, carried only in memory, in rope, in record. It feels almost magical. We know this was not simple guesswork. The Egyptians studied the heavens. They aligned their temples to the stars, their pyramids to the cardinal points. They knew that the universe had order, and they believed the earth should reflect it. Surveying was more than farming. It was more than fairness. It was a reflection of cosmic truth. When you measured the land, you were in a sense imitating the gods. You were taking chaos and giving it shape. You were taking flood and turning it into field. The word for surveyor, harpedonopte, means rope stretchers. Isn't that wonderful? Rope stretchers. Those who drew straight lines on the earth. Simple, yes, but imagine life without them. Without ropes, without plumb lines, without rods to mark the corners. How would we divide the land? How would we build a house? How would we shape a temple? Every great structure of Egypt, every wall, every tomb, every pyramid, begins with a surveyor, standing beneath the sun, stretching a rope across the sand. And so a story emerges. The farmer sleeps at night, knowing his harvest is safe. The priest sleeps at night, knowing the temple walls rise straight and true. The pharaoh sleeps at night, knowing his pyramid is aligned to the very stars. All because the rope stretchers walked the land. All because they measured. All because they knew how to take a world drowned in flood and give it boundaries once more. It's easy to overlook them. We remember kings. We remember priests. We remember builders. But the surveyors? They are ghosts in the background. Their names forgotten, their tools left to rot. Yet every map, every chart, every city grid, every piece of land you own today owes something to them. Think of that. The next time you see a fence line, the next time you read a map, the next time you argue about where your land ends and another begins. Remember the Egyptians. Remember the rope stretchers, the first to measure, the first to divide, the first to bring order to the earth. And tonight, as you rest, let the rhythm of their work carry you. Rope stretched, plumb line dropped, rod pressed into soil, step by step, measure by measure, line by line, until the land is quiet, until the dispute is gone, until the Nile has given its gift, and the earth is ready once more. Bread of the sun. Baking in the Nile Valley. The sun rises slowly over the Nile. The river glitters, carrying light across its wide surface. Birds stir from the reeds. Palm trees cast long shadows, stretching toward the villages. And in these villages, another kind of morning begins. Not the sound of kings, not the sound of armies, but the sound of hands grinding grain, bread. It was not luxury. It was life itself. For the ancient Egyptians, bread was more than food, it was currency, it was survival, it was ritual, it was love, offered fresh each day. Close your eyes, let us step back, let us walk into the courtyards of ancient Egypt and watch as bread is born. A woman kneels beside her grinding stone. The stone is heavy, her arms are strong, shaped by years of this daily rhythm, back and forth, each motion steady, unhurried, timeless. Grains of emmer wheat crack and fall, the husks break, the soft white flour collects, dust rises into the air, settling on her skin, making her glow pale in the morning sun. The sound is soft, like a slow heartbeat against stone. Grind, pause, grind again. This was the music of Egypt, not harps, not flutes, but the sound of women grinding wheat for the bread that would feed the nation. The flour falls into a basket, its texture rough, its color warm, its scent faintly sweet. She mixes it with cool water from the Nile. A little yeast, sometimes wild. Sometimes she adds honey, sometimes dates, sometimes nothing more than grain and water. Her hands press and fold, press and fold. She pushes the dough forward, then pulls it back, again and again. Her palms leave their mark, her fingers press deep. The dough grows warm beneath her touch, alive with breath, alive with promise. Nearby her children play. Their laughter mixes with the sound of grinding stones. A dog barks, a donkey brays. The air fills with the rhythm of life. But her focus remains on the dough. She knows its weight, she knows its texture, she knows when it is ready. Now she carries it to the oven. The oven is not grand, it is a clay dome, built by hand, its surface cracked with years of heat. The mouth glows red with fire. Inside, embers flicker like captive stars. She leans forward. The heat brushes her face. The smell of smoke fills her lungs. With practiced hands, she presses the dough against the curved wall. It clings, it bubbles, it begins to change. The smell rises immediately. Warm, sweet, earthy. It drifts into the courtyard. It drifts into the street. It drifts across the village. This is the smell of Egypt. Not perfume, not incense, but bread. Bread was payment. Bread was wages. A worker building a pyramid was paid in loaves. A farmer digging canals was paid in loaves. A soldier standing guard was paid in loaves. To count wealth, you counted grain. To count life, you counted bread. And bread was never absent, even in death. Loaves were placed in tombs, stacked beside jars of beer, waiting for the soul in the afterlife. Some loaves, hard as stone, still sit in museums today. Thousands of years later, their shape remains, their story intact. There were many kinds of bread. Round loaves for the poor, flat cakes for daily meals, sweet breads with honey and fruit, reserved for the wealthy, reserved for the gods. Some were shaped like animals, some shaped like little gods, some left plain and simple, a humble circle of life. But no matter the shape, no matter the sweetness, each loaf carried the same truth. It was food, it was life, it was the bond between Nile and people. Let us return to the courtyard. The woman pulls the bread from the oven, steam rises, twisting into the air. Her children run to her, laughing, reaching. Their small hands stretch forward. They break the bread apart. They eat quickly, hungrily. The father takes a piece. The mother takes a piece. The children devour the rest. The bread is rough, sometimes gritty with stone dust. It scratches their teeth. It wears down their molars. Archaeologists today can still see the marks of bread on the jaws of mummies. But to the family, this is not a problem. This is life. This is fullness. This is joy. In temples, bread was sacred. Each morning, priests placed loaves before the statues of gods. Fresh bread, warm bread, symbols of devotion. What greater gift could a human give to the divine than the food that sustained life itself? The gods received bread. The dead received bread. The living received bread. All of Egypt lived on its warmth. Close your eyes now. Imagine the sound of grinding stones. Back and forth, back and forth. Imagine the smell of dough, sticky and alive beneath the palms. Imagine the oven's fire, crackling, whispering, painting the night with orange light. Imagine the first bite, rough but warm, a piece of the sun captured in your hands. And think of this, for more than 3,000 years, this rhythm never stopped. Every morning, grains ground. Every afternoon, dough kneaded. Every evening, bread baked. Every night, loaves eaten. The rhythm of bread was the rhythm of Egypt. The Nile gave the grain, the people gave their labor, the ovens gave the fire, the bread gave them life, over and over, again and again, like the turning of seasons, like the rising of the sun. Bread of the Nile, bread of the sun, bread of the people. Sleep now, rest now, hear the grinding, hear the fire, smell the bread, taste the warmth. The story of Egypt is not written only in stone. It is written in loaves. It is written in the hands that shaped them. It is written in the mouths that ate them. Bread of the Nile Valley, bread of life itself. The art of brewing beer. Imagine a clay jar, not small, not delicate, but heavy, rough, sun-baked. Its sides carry fingerprints of the potter who shaped it, its base still dusted with the sands of the courtyard. At first glance, it looks simple, but inside, something remarkable is happening. The surface ripples with bubbles, a faint hiss rises from the froth, and if you lean close, you might even hear the breath of fermentation, soft, steady, alive. This jar holds more than liquid. It holds a story of invention, of survival, of how a civilization turned grain into something greater. This jar holds beer, the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. For Egyptians, beer was not a treat. It was not reserved for festivals or kings. It was as essential as bread itself, thick, filling, nourishing, more food than drink. It was poured into the hands of farmers, given as wages to workers, lifted in prayer to the gods, and sealed into tombs for the journey beyond death. In many ways, beer was Egypt's greatest invention, because it sustained not just the body, but the spirit of an entire people. How was it made? It began with barley. Fields stretched across the floodplains, their golden stalks swaying like waves in the afternoon light. Farmers bent to cut them, their sickles sharp, their backs aching, but their minds already imagining the bread, the beer, the life this grain would bring. Once gathered, the barley was ground by hand. Picture the sound, stone against stone, a steady rhythm echoing in every household, fine flour rising in small clouds, settling in the hair, the eyelashes, the folds of cloth. This was the heartbeat of Egyptian kitchens, grain reduced to powder, powder turned into sustenance. But here's where the magic began. Some of the barley was baked into loaves, not golden, not crisp, but dense and half-baked, strange bread, not meant for eating. Instead, it was destined for the jar, broken, crumbled, softened in water, forming the base of the brew. Other grains were soaked, left to sprout tiny shoots. Sprouted grain meant sugar, and sugar meant fermentation. Now step into a courtyard in your mind. The ground is hard, dry, covered in dust. Clay jars line the walls. A woman kneels, her hands steady. She breaks apart barley loaves, dropping them piece by piece into the jar. Beside her, another woman stirs with a paddle. The mixture sloshes, dark and thick, grain swirling in water. The air fills with a smell, sweet, earthy, slightly sour, like bread left too long in the sun. This is the moment when magic takes hold. The wild yeasts drifting through the air, silent, unseen, settle into the mixture. They feast on the sugars, they breathe, they multiply, and in doing so, they transform water and grain into something new. Day by day, the jar comes alive. Foam rises, then falls. The mixture hisses, then quiets, and when the jar is opened, Egypt has its drink. Now picture the workers, stonecutters at the pyramids, their bodies dark with sweat, builders lifting blocks under the punishing sun. Their reward, not coins, but bread and beer. Beer was payment, beer was energy, beer was survival. Imagine them sitting together in the shade, passing a jug from hand to hand. The liquid is cloudy, grainy, thick. They sip it through straws of reed to filter out the husks. It is sour-sweet, strange to our taste, but filling to theirs. It cools their throats, it fills their stomachs, and for a moment, it turns hardship into laughter. But beer was not only for workers, it was for the gods. In temples, priests poured jars of frothing beer as offerings. They believed the gods drank it too. Osiris, lord of the green fields, gods of fertility, of harvest, of life. Beer was prayer in liquid form, and in tombs, beer was buried beside the dead. So the departed would not thirst in the afterlife, so they could feast with their ancestors. Jars of beer beside jars of grain and honey. Beer moved between worlds, from the hands of laborers to the hands of kings, to the hands of the gods. And then came the festivals. Imagine the streets of Thebes or Memphis, alive with music, drums echoing, flutes crying into the night, crowds gather, torches burn, and beer flows freely. Men and women drink together, voices rising in song, dancers move, priests chant, and jars are emptied into mouths, onto altars, into the very earth. For one night, the city forgets its burdens. For one night, beer is not wages or duty, but joy. And here's what might surprise you. The beer of Egypt did not look like ours. It was not clear, golden, sparkling. It was thick, heavy, almost like porridge. You chewed it as much as you drank it. Some brews were sweetened with honey, others flavored with dates or herbs. Each batch was different, a fingerprint of the family or temple that made it. And still, across 3,000 years, the act remained the same. Grain, water, yeast, time. The same 4 steps, the same transformation, the same comfort. So close your eyes and return to the jar. The clay is warm, the air smells of bread and earth. You hear it fizz, you watch it bubble, you feel the history inside. This is Egypt, not carved in stone, not painted in tombs, but brewed in clay, passed from hand to hand, poured from life into afterlife. The art of brewing beer, the drink that fed a nation, that built its monuments, that honored its gods. The drink that carried Egypt forward, one jar at a time. Perfumes of the afterlife. There are some things in history you can touch. Cold stone, heavy gold, the brittle crackle of papyrus. There are some things you can see, walls covered in painted gods, columns rising like forests of stone, the silhouette of a pyramid against the sky. And then there are things you cannot see, things you cannot hold, only breathe. Perfume, a fragrance, a memory, a presence. Perfume does not last. It rises into the air, slips through time, dissolves into nothing. And yet in ancient Egypt, perfume was the very essence of eternity. Think about that for a moment. A civilization that carved temples from mountains, raised pyramids toward the stars, wrapped its dead in linen that has lasted 4,000 years, also placed its faith in something invisible, something that could vanish with a single breath. And still, they believed that without perfume, eternity was incomplete. Step with me now into a perfumer's workshop. The walls are mud brick, the air is thick, grinding stones scrape, wooden pestles pound. A boy crushes blue lotus petals, their scent heady and sweet. A woman stirs oil, heating it slowly over a clay oven until it thickens. A man sprinkles resin, frankincense, myrrh, pine, imported from deserts and distant lands. The room is alive with fragrance, sharp, sweet, smoky, heavy. Jars line the shelves, alabaster, clay, faience, each sealed with wax, each hiding a treasure. Perfume, in this place, is not decoration, it is ritual, it is medicine, it is prayer. The Egyptians believed scent was the breath of the gods. When a temple priest burned incense, he was not making smoke, he was feeding the nostrils of a god, carrying words without sound. When a woman anointed her hair with oil, she was not beautifying herself, she was aligning with Hathor, goddess of love and joy. When mourners placed jars of perfume in a tomb, they were not leaving gifts, they were ensuring the dead would rise into the afterlife clothed in sweetness, not decay. Perfume was protection, perfume was magic, perfume was the invisible armor of the soul. We know this not just from stories, but from discovery. In tomb after tomb, archaeologists have opened sealed jars, some still carry traces of their ancient contents. When the lid cracks, a faint breath escapes, the ghost of a fragrance, trapped for 3,000 years. Imagine it, the first whiff of perfume, made for a queen long dead, a scent prepared for a pharaoh's journey into eternity, the closest thing to time travel, not through sight, not through sound, but through smell. The recipes were complex: lotus and lily, frankincense and myrrh, cinnamon, pine, cedar, honey, wine, mixed with oils of moringa or bolanos, thickened with resins, aged in jars for months. Perfume was not casual, it was chemistry, alchemy, devotion. Every drop was labor, every jar was wealth. And the best perfumes, they said, were so sweet, so heavy, so divine, that even gods turned their faces toward them. One of the most famous scents was kaifi, not a single perfume, but a blend. 16 ingredients, sometimes more: honey, raisins, wine, myrrh, cinnamon, juniper berries, lotus blossoms. It was ground, boiled, soaked, and aged until the air itself seemed to sing when it burned. Kaifi was perfume, but also medicine. It was said to soothe anxiety, to cure insomnia, to heal lungs, and at night priests burned it before statues of gods, sending fragrant prayers spiraling upward like smoke. Kaifi was not just fragrance, it was a lullaby, a remedy, a promise of divine presence. And yet, perfumes were not only for gods and kings, common people too anointed their skin with oils. They wore scented cones of wax on their heads, melting slowly in the heat, dripping fragrance into their hair. They carried amulets filled with resins. They believed scent could repel disease, attract love, and guard against the evil eye. Perfume was not vanity, it was survival. In the blazing Egyptian sun, where sweat and dust clung to the body, oils soothed the skin and covered the smell of labor. A drop of perfume was not decoration, it was dignity. But in death, perfume became something more. When a body was mummified, it was not only dried with natron, it was washed with fragrant oils, stuffed with resins, covered in incense. Perfume was not hiding death, it was transforming it, turning a body into something divine, fragrant as a god. To smell of sweetness in the tomb was to be recognized in the afterlife. To smell divine was to become divine. Archaeologists today still find these perfumes, locked in alabaster jars. Some have been tested, some have even been recreated. One researcher described opening a jar and catching the faintest trace of lotus, resin, and honey. It was not strong, it was not fresh, but it was there, a ghost from Egypt's golden age, slipping across time through the one sense that never forgets. And so, in a way, the Egyptians were right. Perfume is eternal, not because it lasts, but because it lingers in memory, stronger than stone, a pyramid you can forget, a god you can lose faith in, but the smell of something sweet, warm and holy, that can cling to the soul forever. So when you think of Egypt, don't think only of pyramids, temples, and hieroglyphs. Think of fragrance. Think of jars sealed in darkness, waiting to be opened. Think of a queen, preparing for eternity, anointing her body in oil and lotus, believing that smell would carry her into the afterlife. Perfume was their invisible treasure, their bridge to eternity, their breath of the gods. And though the bottles are empty now, though the air has carried their sweetness away, in some hidden chamber, deep in the sands, perhaps even now, there lingers one last breath of Egypt, waiting for someone to find it, waiting to be inhaled, waiting to rise again. The secrets of Egyptian blue. There are colors that fade, colors that break apart in the sunlight, that wash away in rain, that vanish after a lifetime. And then there are colors that endure, colors that refuse to die, that stay bright across millennia, that hold on to memory, long after the hands that painted them have turned to dust. One such color, perhaps the most mysterious of them all, is Egyptian blue, the very first synthetic pigment in human history, forged not by chance, not by nature, but by deliberate human invention. A color born in fire, that glows with a secret even today. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the desert, the endless sand, the cliffs and the Nile, the palette of the earth itself. Yellow, brown, white, stone and dust. Now picture something else, something unexpected. A wall painted with deep blue stars, a goddess with hair the color of the night sky, a statue with eyes so blue they seem to pierce through time. Where did that color come from? There were no sapphire mines, no natural blue pigments waiting to be dug up. The Egyptians made it. They made it from scratch. In workshops tucked behind temple courtyards, the air was thick with heat and dust. Artisans, with patience measured not in minutes but in years, ground quartz sand until it was smooth as flour. They took copper ores, malachite, azurite, green stones from the desert cliffs. They measured natron, that mysterious white salt found in dry lake beds, the same salt used in mummification. And then, they lit the fire. Imagine the roar of the kiln, fueled by desert wood, fueled by dung, fueled by hands working bellows in rhythm. Inside, the mixture of sand, copper, and natron transformed. The flames reached 850 degrees, the powders fused, and out of fire came a miracle, a substance that could be crushed into pigment, a pigment that glowed with the color of eternity. Egyptian blue. This was not just paint, it was more than decoration, it was cosmic, it was divine. To paint in blue was to paint with the sky, it was to summon the heavens into stone, to give statues the very skin of gods, to turn tombs into miniature versions of the cosmos. In temples, ceilings were painted blue, dotted with yellow stars, so when you looked up, even inside the stone heart of a temple, you were looking at the heavens. In tombs, the walls shimmered with blue lotus flowers, symbols of rebirth, symbols of waking again after the night of death. Blue hair for Hathor, the goddess of motherhood. Blue skin for Amun and Osiris, gods who transcended death itself. Egyptian blue was a spell, painted onto stone, binding eternity into color. But there is another secret, hidden deep inside the pigment itself. Modern scientists, studying flakes of Egyptian blue, shining lasers upon them, discovered something remarkable. The pigment glows, not in sunlight, not in candlelight, but under infrared light, in a spectrum our eyes cannot see. It emits a faint, ghostly glow, as if it remembers the fire that birthed it. Think about that. A color made 3,000 years ago, still glowing today, still whispering in wavelengths, a silent signal across time. It is almost as though the pigment itself carries the memory of eternity. Picture an archaeologist in the desert. He brushes dust from a crumbled wall. The reds are faded, the yellows have dulled. But in the cracks, tiny specks of blue still gleam. It is the same blue seen by the artisan who painted it, the same blue seen by the priest who entered that temple, the same blue that Pharaoh himself may have gazed upon in the torchlight. Unchanged, unbroken, unfading, Egyptian blue does not leave. And yet, for all its brilliance, it carried mystery too. How did the Egyptians discover the recipe? Was it by accident, sand and copper left too long in a fire? Or was it deliberate, the work of minds experimenting, trying, failing, trying again? We may never know. What we do know is this: once they created it, they guarded it. The secret of Egyptian blue spread slowly, from Egypt to Greece, from Greece to Rome. It was painted in frescoes in Pompeii. It adorned statues and mosaics. But then, somehow, it was forgotten. For centuries, no one knew how to make it again. The recipe vanished, like a spell sealed away, until modern science rediscovered it, until laboratories recreated it, until once again, the blue of eternity was reborn in fire. Imagine standing in a tomb, torch in hand. The air is still, the silence heavy. On the wall painted thousands of years ago, a goddess watches you. Her skin is the color of twilight. Her hair is the color of deep water. The blue glows faintly, as though it holds within it the breath of the stars. You are staring at a color that has not changed in 3 millennia. A color the ancient Egyptians believed could outlast death itself. And maybe they were right, because Egyptian blue is still here, still glowing, still carrying its quiet secret. Not all treasures shine like gold. Some glow softly, silently, waiting for us to notice. Egyptian blue, the first color of eternity, the color that will not die. Glassmaking in the desert. There are moments in human history when people discovered how to shape the world itself, how to take what seemed ordinary, sand, stone, fire, and coax from it something utterly magical. Glass is one of those miracles. And in the deserts of ancient Egypt, thousands of years before skyscrapers gleamed with windows, before chandeliers sparkled in European halls, the Egyptians were already mastering the art of glass. Imagine the desert at midday. The sun burns white against the horizon, the sand stretches endless, glittering, shifting. Now imagine taking that sand, heating it in fire, and transforming it into something clear, fragile, radiant. This was no simple trick. It was alchemy. It was patience. It was the desert teaching humankind how to make stars solid. We know the Egyptians loved brilliance. Their temples glowed with polished stone. Their tombs glittered with gold. But glass gave them something new. It gave them color trapped in solid form. It gave them light that could be shaped, melted, poured, and reborn. From sand and fire, they conjured beads the color of turquoise, amulets the shade of emerald, vessels that gleamed like captured drops of sky. Picture a workshop hidden behind a palace wall. The air is thick with heat. Furnaces roar, their flames licking clay crucibles. Inside, crushed quartz sand mixes with natron, the same salt used to dry the dead, and lime brought from the riverbeds. As the mixture melts, a strange magic occurs. It turns fluid, it glows orange, and when cooled, it hardens into something entirely new. Glass. The workers stir it with rods, stretch it into threads, wind it around sticks, pinch it into beads, and slowly, the desert gives birth to color. For the Egyptians, glass was not just beauty, it was power. They wore beads of lapis blue glass to invoke protection from the gods. They carved scarab amulets from green glass to symbolize rebirth, the eternal cycle of life. Even pharaohs wore glass in their jewelry, not because they lacked gemstones, but because glass itself was a miracle. It shimmered, it shone, it whispered of fire and eternity. And here's a secret. The Egyptians may not have been the first to melt glass, but they were the first to truly master it, to control it, to make it an art. By the time of the New Kingdom, their workshops were centers of innovation. Beads poured out in the thousands, amulets traded along the Nile, jars and bowls tinted with cobalt blue or copper green. Glass became part of daily life, from humble ornaments worn by farmers to glittering treasures buried with kings. But glass carried something else, something spiritual. It was the material of transformation, born of fire, shaped by human hands, frozen in time. The Egyptians must have seen in it a reflection of the soul itself, fragile, luminous, but enduring beyond death. So when they placed glass amulets on mummies, it was not decoration, it was protection, a charm for the afterlife, a reminder that even in the darkness of the tomb, color and light would endure. Archaeologists digging in the sands of Amarna, the short-lived city of Akhenaten, found the remains of entire glass-making workshops, shards of vessels, furnace fragments, lumps of half-fused sand. They also found something even stranger. Bright glass ingots, carefully shaped for transport, blocks of blue, green, and yellow, ready to be traded across the ancient world. Egypt was not only making glass for itself, it was exporting brilliance, sending its colors to Cyprus, to Mesopotamia, to Greece. The desert was becoming an international center of light. But imagine the mystery. You are a villager, walking along the Nile. You see a priest wearing an amulet, shining green like a gemstone. But it is not emerald, it is something else, something made by fire, something that should not exist. How would it feel to see color made solid, to hold in your hand a bead that seemed as if the gods themselves had dropped a piece of sky into the earth? It must have felt like magic, and maybe in a way it was. Even today, when we look at those beads in museums, they still shimmer. They have not dulled, they have not broken. Their colors, trapped in glass, still whisper of a fire long gone. And yet, they are fragile too. So fragile you fear they might crumble in your hand, like time itself, balancing between strength and fragility. Perhaps that is why glass felt sacred, because it reminded the Egyptians of life, fragile, shining, always at risk of breaking, and yet, when preserved, capable of outlasting centuries. So when we speak of glass-making in the desert, we are not speaking only of beads and amulets. We are speaking of the human desire to capture beauty, to hold light in the palm of the hand, to make something fragile endure. Egyptian glass was not just an art, it was a statement, that even in the harshest desert, light could be born, that even from sand, eternity could be shaped. The furnaces are gone now, the artisans are dust, but their creations remain. Blue beads, green amulets, yellow jars, still shimmering in the cases of museums, still whispering the secret of their birth. And maybe if you lean close, you will hear the desert speak, you will hear the fire echo, you will see, in a single bead, the story of how humans first learned to make magic solid. Glass-making in the desert, a miracle of fire, a memory of eternity. The first sailboats of the Nile. Before roads were carved, before wheels turned on dusty tracks, before kingdoms were joined by highways of stone, there was the river, the Nile, the great winding vein of Egypt, a river that did not just water the land but carried the people, their dreams, their gods. And on this river, human beings made one of their earliest and greatest inventions, the sailboat. Imagine the scene. The water glitters under the sun, papyrus reeds sway on the banks, and out on the surface, a boat glides, not by oar, not by muscle, but by the breath of the wind itself. A sail. white against the blue sky, catches the air. The boat moves, graceful, silent, as if the river and sky had become one. This was no ordinary vessel. This was humanity learning to borrow the power of nature, not just the current of the Nile, but the invisible force of the wind. The Egyptians were the first people we know to build true sailboats, not rafts, not canoes, but vessels shaped, balanced, guided, with a single purpose: to travel farther, faster, to conquer the river. At first they built them from papyrus stalks, bundled tight, light enough to skim the water, but soon as their knowledge grew, they turned to wood, imported cedar from Lebanon. Strong planks lashed together with rope, boats sturdy enough to carry not just people, but goods, grain, stone for temples, and offerings for the gods. Picture an early morning along the Nile. Merchants load baskets of bread, jars of beer, bundles of linen. Priests place statues of gods wrapped in cloth. Fishermen bring their nets, heavy with tilapia and perch. The sail rises, the wind catches, and the journey begins. Upstream, against the current, the wind carries them north. Downstream, with the river's flow, the current carries them south. It was perfect, a balance between water and air, a rhythm as natural as breathing. And with these boats, Egypt itself was born. Villages became towns, towns became cities, cities became kingdoms. Because now, goods could travel, ideas could travel, even armies could travel. The sailboat was not just a tool, it was a thread, weaving Egypt into one long ribbon, along the banks of the Nile. But it wasn't only practical, it was spiritual. To the Egyptians, sailing was sacred. The sun god Ra himself was imagined sailing across the sky in his great solar bark. Every morning, he rose in the east, his golden sail unfurled, bringing light to the world. And every evening, he sailed into the underworld, fighting darkness through the night, only to return again at dawn. So when the Egyptians built their sailboats, they weren't just making vessels, they were imitating the gods. They were echoing the journey of Ra. Imagine a funeral procession on the river, a boat draped in linen, a coffin resting inside, priests chanting prayers. The sail fills, the boat glides. It is not just a journey to the tomb, it is a voyage to the afterlife, a soul carried by wind and water to eternity. Archaeologists have found models of these boats placed inside tombs. Tiny wooden sailboats, perfectly crafted, as gifts for the dead, so that even in the next world, the soul could travel, so that the journey would never end. And they have found real boats too. The most famous, the Great Khufu ship, buried beside the Great Pyramid, a massive cedar boat, over 140 feet long, disassembled, carefully hidden in a pit. When it was uncovered, and the planks were fitted together again, it revealed not just a masterpiece of craftsmanship, but a message. Even the greatest of pharaohs needed a boat to sail into the afterlife. But let's return to the living Nile. The river full of boats. Imagine it, a flotilla of sails rising in the distance, merchants shouting, fishermen singing, priests chanting, children laughing as they splash in the shallows. The Nile became a highway, a marketplace, a theater of life. Without sailboats, Egypt would not have been Egypt. Its temples could not have been built. Its food could not have been distributed. Its armies could not have marched so far. The sail was more than fabric. It was freedom. But think of the genius, to look at the sky, to feel the wind on your face, and to say, this invisible force can move us. We can trap it, harness it, ride it. It was human imagination made real. It was courage too, because to sail is to trust the unseen, to give yourself to air and water, to forces larger than yourself. And yet, the Egyptians mastered it. They built a world upon it. Today, when we see those ancient carvings, boats etched into tomb walls, sails spread wide, they look simple, almost childlike. But behind that simplicity lies brilliance. The first sailboats of the Nile were more than transport. They were symbols. Symbols of life, of death, of eternity. Symbols of a people who understood that to survive in the desert, you must learn to move with the river and dance with the wind. And so, the next time you see a sailboat drifting across water, its white canvas filled, its hull gliding silently, remember, you are watching an echo of Egypt, an invention born on the Nile over 5,000 years ago. An invention that carried kings, fed farmers, and gave the gods themselves a vessel for the sky. The first sailboats, not just boats, not just sails, but the breath of eternity, woven into cloth, rising above the Nile, forever. The sacred geometry of pyramids. Stand before a pyramid, close your eyes, feel its shadow. It does not move, it does not bend, it does not crumble easily. It rises, sharp, straight, enduring. The pyramid is not just stone. It is silence in shape. It is time made visible. It is geometry transformed into eternity. For thousands of years, they have stood, in the desert heat, in the desert storms. While empires collapsed, while kings came and went, while entire languages were forgotten, the pyramids remained. And the secret lies not just in their size, not just in their stone, but in their numbers. their measurements, their geometry. Imagine the architects, priests of math, engineers of the sacred, men who held ropes, straightened them with knots, measured with wooden rods, and looked to the stars for guidance. They were not simply builders, they were magicians of proportion. They believed that numbers were divine, that geometry itself was holy, that a structure shaped correctly could channel the eternal order of the universe. And so the pyramids rose, not only as tombs for kings, but as symbols of cosmic harmony. Consider this: the Great Pyramid of Khufu, built more than 4,000 years ago, is aligned almost perfectly to the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. How did they do this without compasses? They watched the sky, they tracked the movements of stars, and with ropes stretched across the sand, they mapped the heavens onto the earth. The pyramid became a mirror of the cosmos. The desert became a reflection of the sky. Look deeper at its angles. The slope of the Great Pyramid's sides, about 51 degrees. Not random, not an accident. That angle allows the pyramid to rise high while remaining stable, but it also encodes a secret. Because if you take the height of the Great Pyramid and compare it to the perimeter of its base, the ratio is nearly equal to the ratio of a circle's radius to its circumference. In other words, the pyramid is a square made into a circle, a mountain of stone that whispers of pi. How could they know this? Did they measure the earth? Did they glimpse truths we only rediscovered later? Or was it intuition, a sense of harmony too deep to explain? Some say the pyramids also hold the golden ratio, phi, the mysterious number that appears in shells, in flowers, in galaxies, a proportion of beauty, a pattern of life itself. In the pyramid's design, some see that same proportion, as if the Egyptians were not just building for kings, but building for eternity, as if they wanted their tombs to echo the very language of the cosmos. Step inside the pyramid. The geometry does not end at the surface. Passageways run at angles, narrow shafts point toward constellations, the Orion Belt, the North Star. These shafts are too precise to be chance. Perhaps they were pathways for the soul. Perhaps they were guiding lights, helping a dead pharaoh find his way among the stars. The pyramid itself became a stairway, stone into sky, earth into eternity. But geometry is not only cosmic, it is human. Think of the workers, tens of thousands of hands, each stone set in place with ropes, levers, ramps, each block aligned with care. They did not have machines, they had measurement, they had rhythm. A team of surveyors stretching cords across the sand, marking perfect right angles with knotted ropes, measuring lengths with rods, checking the level with water in a trench. And somehow, with these simple tools, they created precision we can barely match today. The pyramid is not only stone, it is thought, it is number. It is proof that human beings with vision and patience can turn sand and sky into order. But here is the mystery. Why? Why this shape? Why this scale? Why geometry so perfect that even now, scientists, mathematicians, architects still argue about its meaning? Some say it was purely practical. The pyramid is the most stable way to stack stone. No walls collapsing inward, no roofs caving, just weight pressing downward, anchoring the structure for millennia. Others say it was symbolic. A pyramid is a sunbeam made solid, its four triangular sides spreading out like rays, its tip pointing to the heavens. It was the king's ladder, a frozen sunrise, and others whisper of mysteries still hidden, of lost knowledge, of secrets sealed in stone. Geometry not just for stability, but for energy, for power, for something we no longer understand. Stand again before the pyramid. Let your eyes trace its sides. Let your mind wander through its angles. Every measurement is deliberate. Every proportion is chosen. Every stone carries not just weight, but meaning. This is sacred geometry, not lines on parchment, not symbols in chalk, but numbers carved into the desert, equations you can touch, formulas you can climb. The pyramid is proof that the ancients believed the world itself was a temple, that by shaping stone with the language of geometry, they could echo the order of the cosmos, that a tomb could be more than a resting place. It could be a hymn, a prayer, a song of numbers sung to the eternal. And so, after 4,000 years, we still stand in their shadow. We still argue about their secrets. We still marvel at their perfection. The pyramids are not only tombs, they are questions. Questions in stone, questions written in the language of geometry, questions that may never be fully answered. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps they were meant to last, not as answers, but as mysteries. Mysteries that draw us closer, generation after generation, to the eternal rhythm of numbers, to the sacred geometry of the world. The diseases of the pharaohs. They were kings, they were queens, they were gods upon the earth. They wore crowns of gold, they commanded armies, they built monuments of stone that touched the sky, and yet, beneath the jewels, beneath the linen wrappings, beneath the mask of eternity, their bodies told another story. The story of pain, the story of sickness, the story of being human. Walk into the halls of a museum, look at a mummy behind glass. Its skin is darkened, its body shriveled, its bones stiff with time. But look closer. Beneath the wrappings, beneath the resin, scientists have found clues. Clues written in bone, etched in teeth, hidden in tissue that survived the desert sands. And those clues tell us something astonishing. The pharaohs, the great lords of Egypt, suffered, just like us, perhaps even worse than us. Arthritis, twisting joints, bending spines. Tutankhamun, the boy king, died before he was 20, and yet his body shows a clubfoot, a cleft palate, and bones so fragile he may have walked with a cane. Imagine it, the golden chariot he is often pictured with. He may never have ridden it. The young king of the world, hobbling through his palace, his body betraying him. The mummies whisper of gout, of gallstones, of bladder stones, of teeth so rotten that even the richest pharaohs lived in constant pain. Picture a banquet in Thebes, tables heavy with bread, with roasted goose, with figs and honey and wine. The guests laugh, the music plays, but the pharaoh sits at the head of the table, smiling through agony, every bite grinding against a decayed tooth, every swallow reminding him that even kings cannot escape disease. There are signs of tuberculosis, of parasitic worms, of malaria carried by the bite of mosquitoes. The very Nile that gave life to Egypt also spread sickness, still waters, reeds, heat, perfect breeding ground for pests. And so, beneath the pyramids, beneath the painted tombs, scientists have found traces of DNA. Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite that causes malaria. It lived in the blood of the pharaohs. It may have killed them as surely as any enemy. Even in death, disease clung to them. Mummification preserved not only flesh, but illness. Scans reveal clogged arteries. Yes, the pharaohs of Egypt, who walked with the gods, suffered from heart disease, their blood vessels thick with fat, their hearts straining against the weight of luxury. Too much meat, too much sugar, too much wine, the curse of kingship itself. But the most haunting thing is that we know these things, not from their own words, but from their bodies. They wrote of victories, they carved battles into stone, they painted themselves as perfect, immortal, divine. Never once did they carve arthritis on a temple wall. Never once did they paint toothaches in a tomb. And yet, time was honest. Time revealed what they could not. The pharaohs were fragile, the pharaohs were mortal, the pharaohs were broken inside. But this story is not only about pain, it is about knowledge. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, an ancient medical text, shows they studied injuries of the head, the chest, the spine. They knew of wounds, of infections, of ways to stitch and heal. And yet they could not heal everything. They could not cure the slow rot of teeth. They could not cure the bite of a mosquito. They could not cure the clogging of the heart. Even in the land of gods, death always found a way. But here is the strange thing. By studying these diseases in mummies, we are learning about ourselves. Arthritis, gout, cancer, these are not modern illnesses, they are ancient companions. They walked with humanity long before our time. They haunted even the greatest kings. And as we peer into CT scans of mummies, we are not only solving ancient mysteries, we are facing our own reflection. So the next time you see the golden mask of Tutankhamun, remember, behind the gold was a fragile boy, behind the mask was pain, behind the crown was a body that knew disease as deeply as any of us. The pyramids may stand forever, the temples may rise like mountains of stone, but the pharaohs inside them were never immortal. Their geometry was perfect, their monuments were eternal, but their flesh was weak, their blood was flawed, their bones were fragile. And that is the truest mystery of all, that the gods of Egypt were in the end as human as we are. Toothpaste of crushed hooves. Close your eyes, and let us step into a quieter Egypt. Not the Egypt of battles and kings, not the Egypt of pyramids that scrape the sky, but the Egypt of mornings. A small home by the river, the smell of bread baking, the call of birds, a child running barefoot in the dust. And inside, in the cool shade of clay walls, a woman sits at a small wooden table. In front of her is a bowl. Inside the bowl, a strange, gritty powder. This was Egyptian toothpaste. The recipe. Listen closely. This was not mint, not sweet gel, not smooth and foamy paste. This was powder made from the earth itself. Crushed ox hooves, burned black in fire. Eggshells, ground into fine white dust. Pumice stone, rough and sharp. Rock salt, stinging on the tongue. Pepper, hot and fiery. And sometimes, the delicate petals of dried iris flower to soften the bitterness, to leave just a trace of sweetness behind. Mixed together, they made a paste. Hard, harsh, powerful. It scoured the teeth clean. It made gums bleed. It stung like fire. And yet, it worked. Why they needed it. The Egyptians loved bread. It was their daily food. Morning bread, evening bread. Bread with beer, bread with honey. But bread was not soft. Every loaf was filled with grit. Tiny fragments of sand and stone slipped in from the grinding of grain. Each bite scraped teeth down like sandpaper. Year after year, tooth enamel wore away. Cavities spread. Gums grew sore. Infection burned through jaws. Archaeologists have looked into the mouths of mummies. They see teeth worn to nubs, holes of abscesses drilled into bone, evidence of lives lived with aching mouths. And so, they brushed. They brushed with powders that bit back against the decay. Imagine the scene. Picture it, a young scribe at dawn. He washes his face in cool water. He lifts a bowl of powder, dips his finger in, rubs it against his teeth. He winces at the sting of pepper. He spits into the sand. He rinses with water from a clay jar. Then he smiles, just faintly, at his clean teeth, before picking up his reed pen to begin the day's work. Or imagine a priest, preparing for the sacred temple rituals. He must be pure. He must be clean. He cannot stand before the gods with decay in his mouth. So he brushes. He cleans with powder. He mutters a prayer as he spits. For him, this act was not vanity. It was worship. Science meets ritual. Thousands of years later, modern dentists found these recipes on papyrus. They were skeptical. They laughed at first. Toothpaste with hooves, with ashes and pepper? It sounded like a joke. But in 2003, at a dental conference in Vienna, they tried it. They ground the powder. They brushed their teeth with it. And they were shocked. It worked. It cleaned better than expected. It stripped away stains. It polished enamel. It left gums stinging, even bleeding. But it was powerful. Perhaps too powerful. The Egyptians had discovered a recipe that was both brutal and brilliant. Beyond medicine. But this was not only about health. To the Egyptians, the body was sacred. Every organ mattered. Every limb, every hair, every tooth. When death came, the body was wrapped in linen. Every part was preserved for the afterlife. And the teeth, yes, even the teeth, had to be clean. They believed that a person could not enter eternity, with decay rotting in their mouth. To stand before Osiris, judge of souls, one had to be pure, one had to be whole. So toothpaste was not just hygiene, it was magic. It was protection. It was a prayer whispered through grit and pain, the human connection. And here is the most beautiful part. We often see Egypt as distant, as alien, as stone and silence. But in toothpaste, we find something different. Something so ordinary, so small, so human. Because haven't you too, stood at a basin in the morning, half awake, toothbrush in hand, scrubbing your teeth, rinsing, spitting, wanting only to feel clean? They did the same, 4,000 years ago, with powders and grit, with hooves and shells, with pepper and flowers. Different recipe, same ritual, same need, same humanity. The whisper of residue. Even now, scientists find tiny traces of these powders on ancient teeth, a grain of pumice, a fragment of eggshell, a ghost of pepper still clinging to the cracks of a mummy's molar. It whispers across time. I cared for my teeth. I fought the pain. I brushed, just as you do. The reflection. So tonight, when you brush your teeth, pause for a moment, feel the bristles, taste the mint, listen to the quiet scrape, and think of them. The pharaoh in his palace, the farmer by his field, the scribe in his study, the priest in his temple, all of them brushing, all of them grimacing at the sting, all of them seeking relief, all of them sharing with us this small ritual of daily life. Toothpaste of crushed hooves, an invention that was ugly, and strange, and brilliant, and deeply, deeply human. Because even in the land of pyramids and gods, people still worried about toothaches, and that, more than gold or glory, makes them feel close to us. Cosmetics of power, coal and malachite. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture an Egyptian face. What comes first to your mind? Not the nose, not the lips, but the eyes. Those black-rimmed, almond-shaped eyes, outlined in deep strokes of coal, shimmering with the green dust of malachite. Eyes that watch across the centuries. Eyes painted like hieroglyphs, as if they too are sacred symbols. This was no ordinary makeup. This was power. This was protection. This was beauty. This was medicine. This was magic. For thousands of years, men and women of Egypt dipped their small sticks into tiny jars of powder, mixed the dust with oil or fat, and drew bold lines around their eyes. A ritual repeated every morning. A ritual of both vanity and devotion. But why? Why did they line their eyes with black and green? Was it only beauty? Was it only fashion? Or was it something more? Archaeologists discovered the truth in the pigments themselves. Coal was not just soot, it was a careful blend. Galena, a dark lead mineral mixed with soot, sometimes with charcoal, sometimes with crushed stone, and malachite, a mineral of brilliant green, ground fine into powder, as bright as emeralds in the desert sun. When these powders were placed on the skin, they did more than decorate, they healed. Modern science tested ancient coal, and the results were astonishing. The compounds in it triggered the body's natural immune response. It reduced infection, it killed bacteria, it shielded the eyes against disease. A powerful defense in a land where the sun blazed and the Nile swarmed with parasites. And the malachite? It too had antibacterial effects. It soothed irritation, it protected against blindness. So every stroke of coal was medicine as much as beauty. Every green dusting of malachite was healing as much as art. But the Egyptians believed more than science. They believed in the gods. And to them, the eye was not just an organ, it was a symbol of cosmic power. The eye of Horus, the Wajed eye, the eye that saw all, the eye that healed, that guarded, that restored balance. To paint one's eyes black, to surround them with green, was to invoke the divine. It was to carry the eye of a god upon your own face. It was protection against evil. It was a shield against curses. It was a way of walking every day under the gaze of eternity. Imagine the morning in a palace in Thebes. The queen sits before a polished bronze mirror. Her servants grind malachite on a small pallet. The powder shimmers like crushed jewels. Another servant mixes coal with oil in a tiny jar. The queen leans forward. Her eyelids are dusted green, her lashes lined in black. When she rises, her gaze is transformed, not only beautiful, but powerful. Her eyes now carry both allure and magic. They dazzle, they protect, they command. But not only queens wore coal. Farmers, scribes, soldiers, even children, every class of society painted their eyes. For beauty, yes, but also for health. The desert sun was merciless. Its glare burned the eyes. And so the coal worked like sunglasses. It shaded vision. It softened the light. When archaeologists uncovered the faces of mummies, they found traces of it still clinging to the skin, lines of black around the eyes, green shadows on the lids. A beauty ritual frozen in time, preserved across millennia. But listen closely, there was also seduction. There was allure. There was mystery. The Egyptians knew the power of the gaze. Eyes that seemed larger, deeper, darker. Eyes that gleamed in torchlight. Eyes that bewitched. To meet the painted gaze of an Egyptian woman was to feel pulled into a spell. To meet the dark-rimmed stare of a pharaoh was to feel authority, power, divinity itself. Their makeup was not just for themselves. It was for others. It was for the world. It was a message, a statement, a charm. We must imagine the markets of Memphis. Vendors selling tiny jars of pigment, green malachite from Sinai, black galena from Aswan, oils of castor and sesame, tiny sticks of wood or bone, used as applicators, and buyers, women, men, children, choosing, grinding, blending. A culture where beauty was not hidden, but celebrated every day. Even in death, the Egyptians carried their cosmetics with them, perfume jars, coal tubes, makeup palettes of polished stone. In tomb after tomb, archaeologists find them, placed carefully beside the body. Because in the afterlife too you needed to be beautiful. You needed protection. You needed the eye of Horus upon your face. And perhaps that is why this small detail, this little jar of powder, this simple act of painting the eyes has survived in memory. It was not trivial. It was not shallow. It was both practical and sacred. It was both health and holiness. It was vanity and ritual, woven together like threads and linen. So when we see those ancient statues, with eyes outlined dark, with lids painted green, we must remember those were not mere decorations. Those were living choices, choices of survival, choices of belief, choices of power. And in a way it continues today. For every time we draw a line of eyeliner, every time we shade a lid with color, we echo them. We echo the Egyptians. We echo queens and farmers, scribes and priests, all of them standing before their mirrors of bronze, all of them dipping into tiny jars of powder, all of them painting their eyes to face the day, to face the gods, to face eternity. The story of coal and malachite is the story of Egypt itself, beauty and practicality, science and spirit, life and afterlife. A civilization that painted its eyes, not only to be seen, but to see more clearly, to see health, to see protection, to see magic, to see eternity, the cosmetics of power, the gaze of gods, the eyes that never die. Wigs of wax and perfume. Not all crowns are made of gold. Some are made of hair. Some are made of wax. Some are made of perfume that melts slowly, drop by drop, into the night. This is the story of the Egyptian wig. Not just a fashion, not just a cover, but a symbol of power, of purity, of beauty that could outlive death itself. Picture Egypt. Not the Egypt of postcards, but the living, breathing Egypt of 3,000 years ago. The air heavy with heat, the desert sun burning on bare skin, the Nile moving slowly, bringing life to the valley. Now imagine daily life under that sun. It is hot, it is dry, it is relentless. Hair becomes a burden. It gathers dust, it attracts lice, it clings with sweat. So the Egyptians shaved it away. Men, women, children, priests, pharaohs. The head was stripped bare, a smooth canvas, a symbol of cleanliness. And yet, the Egyptians were a people who loved beauty. They loved symmetry. They loved ornament. They loved to present themselves not as they were, but as they wished to be seen. So what did they do? They made hair. They created wigs. Wigs of human hair, sometimes mixed with fibers or wool, bound with beeswax, shaped with resin, styled with precision. Step into the wig maker's workshop. The room smells of wax and oil. Hands are busy weaving strands together. Bundles of hair hang from pegs. A craftsman braids locks with practiced speed, weaving them tighter and tighter, layer upon layer, until the pattern becomes almost mathematical. For the poor there were simple wigs, lightweight, functional. For the rich, there were creations so heavy they required pins to stay in place. Cascades of curls, elaborate braids, wigs so thick they looked carved from ebony. A wig was never just a wig. It was a crown. It told you who someone was, their status, their wealth, their identity. Now step outside, the festival begins. The city hums with music, with voices, with life. Women walk with heavy wigs gleaming in the torchlight. Men wear sharp, cropped wigs, curled into neat rows. Children laugh, their heads smooth, some crowned with tiny wigs of their own. And on top of many wigs, there is something more, a cone, made of fat and scented oils, a perfume cone, placed carefully on the crown of the head. At first it looks strange, but as the night deepens, the cone begins to melt. Slowly, drop by drop, the wax seeps into the hair. The perfume fills the air, lotus, myrrh, frankincense, scents rich and intoxicating. The banquet becomes an ocean of fragrance, perfume not dabbed on the wrist but worn like a crown, melting into beauty itself. Priests chose differently. They shaved their heads bare, always. Purity demanded baldness. No wig, no perfume cone, no vanity. But the people outside the temples, they lived with wigs. Nobles, scribes, queens, even soldiers. Everyone wore them, not only for beauty, but for protection. A wig shielded the head from the burning sun. It could be lifted off at the end of the day, cleaned, oiled, perfumed, and worn again. It was practical, and it was art. Even death did not end the wig. In tombs, wigs were placed beside the body, painted on coffins, carved into statues, because in the afterlife, you still had to appear beautiful. You still had to stand before Osiris in glory. You still had to carry with you the perfume of eternity. Now imagine this scene. A queen prepares for a banquet. Her attendants surround her. They bring out the wig, long braids bound with wax, oiled until they gleam like black glass. They set it carefully on her shaved head. They pin it in place. They crown it with a cone of perfume. As she walks into the hall, her scent drifts ahead of her. Her hair shines. Her eyes lined with kohl catch the light. The room falls silent for a moment. She is not simply a woman. She is a vision. She is beauty itself. And perhaps this is why wigs mattered so much, because they were transformation. They allowed you to step into another self, to wear not just hair but identity, to put on beauty like a garment, to set it aside and take it up again. Even today, when we look at statues in museums, we see the wigs carefully carved, locks falling on stone shoulders, rows of braids etched with precision. We see the cones painted on banquet scenes. We see the memory of fragrance long gone, and we realize the wig was never just hair. It was Egypt's answer to the desert sun, to the need for beauty, to the hunger for identity. It was wax. It was perfume. It was power. A crown not of gold, but of fragrance and art. A crown that melts as the music plays. A crown that whispers across time. Even in the desert, we will be beautiful. Even in death, we will be adorned. Even before the gods, we will wear our wigs. Guardians of order, the first police. Not all guardians carry swords. Not all shields are made of bronze. Some guardians walk with staffs. Some carry dogs. Some walk in silence, but their presence keeps a kingdom in balance. This is the story of Egypt's first police, the Medjay, the guardians of order, the quiet protectors of an empire stretched between desert and river. Imagine Egypt in its golden age. The Nile glitters. Temples rise higher than the horizon. Pharaohs rule as living gods. But where there is wealth, there is theft. Where there is power, there is danger. Where there is gold in the temples, there are hands reaching to steal. How do you guard an empire so vast? How do you keep peace in cities bursting with life? How do you protect farmers, traders, and nobles alike? Egypt's answer was not walls. It was not endless armies. It was men trained, men loyal, men who became the first police force in recorded history. At first, order was local. Every village had its own keepers of peace, officials, scribes, or nobles with private guards. Justice was a matter of the powerful watching over the weak. But as the centuries passed, Egypt grew larger, richer, busier. A new kind of force was needed. Something stronger, something central, something that would answer not just to lords but to Pharaoh himself. And so the Medjay were born. Who were they? The Medjay came from Nubia, the land south of Egypt, where deserts met rivers, where warriors were raised in harsh sun and shifting sands. They were allies, but more than that, they became protectors. Elite men, hardened by desert life, who carried staffs and bows. They knew the dunes. They knew the tracks of thieves. They could move silently where others stumbled. Egypt welcomed them. Egypt trained them. And soon, Egypt trusted them more than anyone. Picture a marketplace. Crowds pressing together. Merchants shouting prices. Bread, onions, fish, papyrus scrolls. Amid the noise, a hand slips into a pouch. A loaf is stolen. A bottle of beer is taken from cooling water. Petty theft, common. But the people know. The Medjay will come. They appear in the crowd, tall, sharp-eyed, holding staffs, dogs at their sides. The thief tries to run, but dogs chase faster. Staffs strike harder. Justice is swift. And justice mattered in Egypt. Not just because of law, not just because of Pharaoh, but because of Ma'at. Ma'at, the principle of truth, of balance, of harmony. The Egyptians believed the world itself depended on order. Chaos was death. Disorder was darkness. To disturb the peace was to disturb the cosmos. And so the Medjay were not just guards, they were keepers of Ma'at. Each act of justice kept the world balanced. Each theft punished was a shadow lifted from the land. Punishments were harsh. A thief might lose a hand, a liar might lose an ear, property could be taken, exile could be given. And the greatest punishment of all, a death without burial, to die without being buried, to be left without rights, to be denied passage into the afterlife. This was worse than death itself. This fear alone kept many crimes small. The Medjay did more than guard streets. They stood at the doors of temples. They walked the halls of palaces. They escorted caravans across the desert. They guarded tombs, those mountains of treasure buried beneath sand. For what good is a pyramid if thieves plunder it in the night? What good is a tomb if gold is stolen before the soul can use it in eternity? The Medjay stood as the answer. They became shadows at night, silent watchers by day, guardians of the dead as well as the living. Imagine standing inside the Valley of the Kings. The cliffs glow red at sunset. The tombs are cut deep into stone. Treasures lie hidden below. At the entrance, Medjay wait. Their eyes never leave the horizon. They listen for footsteps, for whispers, for the sound of digging in the dark. Because tomb robbers came with tools, with greed, with desperation, and yet, to rob the dead was to invite the wrath of both Pharaoh and the gods. Still, some tried, and when they were caught, justice was brutal. But the Medjay were not just feared, they were respected, they were trusted. Ordinary people could appeal to them. One old papyrus tells of a man robbed of bread and beer. He cried to the authorities, "My lord, let whatsoever has been stolen be given back to me." It is the voice of an ordinary person, calling out to guardians, to men who stood between chaos and order. And in those moments, the Medjay were not simply Pharaoh's men, they were the people's protectors. Time passed. Dynasties rose and fell. Pharaohs changed. But the Medjay remained. Their role evolved from local guards to elite desert scouts to a full police force. They became more Egyptian than Nubian. Their name itself came to mean police. And long after their beginnings, their shadow still stretched across the land. So when we think of police today, patrolling streets, keeping order, standing between law and chaos, we are seeing echoes that reach back not 100 years, not 1,000, but more than 3,000. Back to the Medjay, back to Egypt, back to the first guardians of order. They walked with staffs, not guns. They worked with dogs, not machines. They served Pharaoh, but also Ma'at. And in their quiet, in their discipline, they carried the weight of balance itself. Not all crowns are made of gold. Not all guardians wear armor. Some walk softly, some watch silently. Some carry staffs in the desert night, keeping the world whole, keeping the stars in their place, keeping chaos away. These were the Medjay, Egypt's first police, guardians of order. Water clocks of Karnak, tick, drop, silence. Another drop, another silence. Time passes not with gears, not with bells, but with water. This is the story of Egypt's water clocks, the silent dripping hours of Karnak, the way a temple measured the universe with nothing more than stone, a vessel, and the flow of water. Imagine Karnak, not as a ruin, not as fallen pillars and shattered statues, but alive. A city of gods carved in stone, columns taller than trees, courtyards blazing in sunlight, walls painted with gods, with pharaohs, with offerings to the divine. Here priests moved like shadows, chanting, walking, burning incense, waiting for the moment, the right moment, the hour chosen by the gods. But how do you know when that hour has come? How do you tell the time in a land without clocks, without watches, without ticking hands? You listen, to the water. Deep inside the temple of Karnak, there stood a vessel, not just a jar, not just a bowl, but a machine, a water clock. It was carved from stone, hollowed, marked with lines on the inside, a tiny hole at the bottom, let water drip at a steady pace. Drop by drop, the level of water sank. Mark by mark, the hours were counted. Priests stood in silence, watching the falling water, knowing when night had passed, knowing when dawn approached, knowing when it was time to speak to the gods. Think of the genius. In the 16th century BC, long before gears, long before pendulums, long before the ticking clocks of Europe, Egypt had time itself flowing in a stone jar. Each line carved inside was not random, it was measured, carefully calculated, hours of the night, divided with care, so that rituals could be performed at the exact moment. For Egyptians believed the gods were precise. Re arose at his hour, the stars wheeled in their order, the river flooded in its season, and the priests of Karnak had to match that rhythm. If they prayed too early, they disturbed the gods. If they prayed too late, they failed in their duty. Only with the water clock, only with the dripping hours, could order, Ma'at, be kept. Picture the night sky above Karnak. Millions of stars burn cold and silent. The priests walk in torchlight. They gather at the holy chambers, but they do not guess the time. They do not trust the eye or the star alone. They look to the vessel, the stone clock dripping quietly, the marks glowing faintly in firelight. each drop a step closer to dawn, each drop a step closer to the gods. The invention was simple, and yet so powerful that it shaped centuries. Other cultures later made their own: Babylon, Greece, Rome. But Egypt was first. Egypt measured time with water before anyone else. And think of what that means. Before seconds, before hours as we know them, before calendars of the world, there were priests, alone in the night, listening to water fall, trusting that the gods kept rhythm with the drip. But time in Egypt was more than ritual. It was life. Farmers needed seasons. Scribes needed calendars. But priests needed hours. Hours for prayers. Hours for offerings. Hours when gods listened, and hours when gods turned away. Without time, there was no order. Without order, there was no Mata. And without Mata, the sun itself might fall from the sky. So the water clock was more than a tool. It was a lifeline, a bridge between human and divine. Think for a moment of the sound itself. Not loud, not rushing, just the whisper of a drop, then silence, then another drop. In the stillness of stone halls, it must have felt like listening to the heartbeat of the earth. Imagine standing there, a priest in white linen, torches flickering, statues watching in silence, and before you, a jar of water slowly falling away. You would wait, you would breathe, you would hear the universe count itself out, drop by drop by drop. The Karnak clock has been found, broken, but real, a vessel of stone, with marks carved deep. It still whispers the story of nights long past. It tells us Egypt measured time not in the way we do, with watches and alarms, but with patience, with rhythm, with faith in the steady fall of water. And perhaps that's why it feels so human, because time itself is not rushing, it is dripping, falling softly, passing whether we notice or not. We today glance at screens, at digital numbers, at ticking hands. But in Karnak, they watched water fall and saw the hours of gods revealed. So when you think of time, think of Karnak. Think of priests listening to silence. Think of drops falling in the night. Think of how an empire, one of the greatest in history, kept its balance not with machines, but with water, with stone, with patience. Because in Egypt, time was not just measured, it was sacred. Not all clocks tick, not all hours strike. Some hours drip quietly, some hours are written in water, and in Karnak, long ago, priests counted them in silence. Drops in the night, whispers of eternity. Obelisks as sun clocks, they rise out of the desert. Tall, sharp, unbroken, obelisks, slender needles of granite, piercing the sky, casting shadows that creep silently across the ground. At first glance they are monuments, decorated pillars, symbols of kings and gods, but in truth, they are more, much more. They are clocks, clocks of light and stone. The earliest way humans learned to measure the hours of the day, by the hand of the sun itself. Imagine standing in ancient Egypt. The air is dry, filled with heat that bends on the horizon. Priests move across the temple courtyard, their white linen robes whispering against stone. Incense curls upward in slow streams, the scent of myrrh, the scent of lotus, and in the center of that sacred space, a single shaft of granite rises, carved from one piece, dragged from quarries miles away, lifted into place with ropes, ramps, and sweat. It points toward the sky, toward Ra, the sun god himself. And as the sun moves overhead, the obelisk answers. It speaks, not in words, but in shadow. The line of darkness slides along the temple floor, marking the hour, marking the rhythm of the day. The Egyptians loved rhythm, they trusted in order. The Nile rose each year in its season. The stars returned in their cycles. The sun never failed to rise again. To live in harmony with these rhythms was to live in harmony with the gods, so they gave time a body. They gave the sun a partner. They set a needle of stone in the earth, and let light carve the hours across the sand. The obelisk was not only sacred, it was practical. Farmers could look to its shadow to know when to return to their fields. Merchants could measure the time of day for markets and trade. Priests could schedule their rituals with precision, guided not by chance but by the shadow of the sun. But how were these marvels made? The quarries of Aswan held the answer. There, massive blocks of granite were carved from bedrock. Stonecutters chipped at the rock with dolerite pounders, their blows echoing in the hot silence. Day after day, year after year, until the stone was freed. Then came the journey. Imagine thousands of men hauling a single block, sliding it on sledges greased with water, dragging it across sand and mud. Once at the temple, ramps of earth and wood were piled higher and higher, until the obelisk could be dragged upright. Then, ropes strained, voices shouted, the earth trembled, and the stone rose. One block of granite, 40, 50, 70 feet tall, standing as if grown from the desert itself. The obelisk was not left plain. Its sides were carved with hieroglyphs, prayers, names of kings, dedications to Ra, stories etched deep, meant to last as long as the stone itself. And at its tip, the pyramidion. It was often covered in electrum, a shining alloy of gold and silver. Each morning, the first rays of the sun would strike the tip and blaze with light. The obelisk became fire, a golden spear, a reflection of the sun on earth. the people would stop. They would breathe in awe, for this was not just a stone, it was a link between heaven and earth, between gods and men, between time and eternity. But the greatest secret of the obelisk was its shadow. Priests learned to read it like a book. Markers were placed on the ground, lines were carved in courtyards. The shadow fell, hour after hour, and with it came order. The morning, the noon, the evening, the sun descending toward the west, toward the land of the dead. Each shift of shadow was a reminder. Time was moving, life was passing, and eternity was waiting. Think of the ordinary Egyptian, a farmer carrying reeds, a child running through the courtyard, a woman selling bread at the market. Each of them, as they passed the temple gates, would glance at the obelisk. They could see the shadow's length, its position. They could tell the hour without words, without devices, without numbers. The obelisk was their clock, a clock everyone could see. The idea spread far. The Greeks studied it. The Romans carried it away. When Rome conquered Egypt, they dragged obelisks back across the sea. They raised them in circuses and forums, in markets and temples, using them to measure time in new lands. Even today you can see them. In Paris, in London, in Rome, obelisks that once stood under Egyptian suns now rise among modern buildings. Their shadows still fall, silent, ancient, unbroken. But what did they mean, beyond telling time? For Egyptians, the obelisk was also a prayer. Its height pointed to heaven, its tip caught the light, its shadow stretched across the earth. It was as if the gods themselves had reached down and left a finger of stone to remind men of the divine order. At sunrise, the obelisk was the world awakening. At noon, it was balance, perfection, the sun at its highest point. At evening, it was farewell, the shadow stretching long and dark, pointing west, toward the hidden realm of the dead. The obelisk told more than hours, it told the story of life. Think of how strange that is. A people who built monuments that have lasted thousands of years, who carved pyramids the size of mountains, who filled temples with hieroglyphs and gods, also trusted something as fragile as a shadow to guide their days. That is the paradox of Egypt. Granite and light, stone and air, the eternal and the fleeting, joined together in a single shape. And now, when you pass an obelisk, whether in Egypt or in Rome, or in New York City's Central Park, stop, look down, find the shadow. It is still moving. It is still marking the hours. It is still whispering the same truth it told 5,000 years ago. Time flows, the sun moves, the shadow lengthens, and we are only travelers, walking inside its rhythm. The obelisk was never just a monument, it was a living clock, a prayer of stone, a spear of light, and though the kings who raised them are long gone, though their names have been forgotten, the obelisks still stand. They still catch the morning fire. They still trace the hours on the earth. The stone rises, the shadow falls, and time, endless time, goes on. The calendar written in the stars. Imagine standing in ancient Egypt. The desert is silent, the air is cool, yet heavy with mystery. The Nile sleeps, but above it the sky is alive. The Egyptians, they did not look at the stars as we do, as faraway burning suns. To them, the heavens were a living map, a guide, a language of the gods. And at the center of this celestial map, one star shined brighter than all, Sirius, the dog star, the star that would return, year after year, just before dawn, and with it, a promise. The promise of the Nile flood, the promise of life, the promise of bread in the ovens and beer in the jars. For them, Sirius was not just a point of light, it was a clock, it was a calendar, it was survival. Pause for a moment. Picture a priest, thousands of years ago, standing on the temple roof at Thebes, his eyes fixed on the horizon, the desert dark, the river hushed, the people waiting, and then, a flicker, a single star rising, and the world changed. That flicker marked the new year. The Egyptians called it Wepet Rempet, the opening of the year, a festival, a celebration, a moment when time itself was reborn. Their calendar, 365 days, 12 months, 30 days each, and then 5 festival days at the end, days outside of time, days for the gods. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Almost like our own. But remember, this was over 4,000 years ago. A people watching the sky so carefully, so patiently, that they learned to measure time itself. And yet, their calendar was not perfect. They missed the tiny fraction, that quarter of a day. Year after year, the drift grew, seasons slipped, festivals fell out of sync. The star rose, but the count was wrong. But think about it. How extraordinary is it that without telescopes, without satellites, without machines, they created a system so close to what we use today? Time wasn't just numbers to them. It was sacred. It was tied to gods. To Isis, goddess of magic, who was linked to Sirius. To Osiris, lord of the afterlife, whose death and rebirth echoed the Nile. Every rising star was a message. Every shadow, every cycle of the moon, every flicker in the heavens, it was all written for them. And so they carved calendars into stone. They painted them in tombs. They aligned temples, to the solstices, to the equinoxes, to the stars themselves. Stand before Karnak, and you feel it. The weight of time. the columns like a forest of stone, but every angle, every shaft of sunlight, is tied to the heavens, a cosmic clock still ticking after thousands of years. Pause here, close your eyes, listen to the desert wind, feel the pull of the stars. For the Egyptians, time was not abstract, it was the heartbeat of the universe, and they were listening. Now imagine the festivals, the people dancing, singing, drinking beer brewed for the occasion, all because Sirius had returned, all because the Nile would rise again, all because the gods kept their promise. But here's the mystery, was it only observation, or did they know more than we give them credit for? How did they measure so precisely? How did they align pyramids so perfectly to true north? How did they map the stars with such accuracy that even modern astronomers are impressed? Were they simply farmers watching the sky, or were they something more, surveyors of heaven, mathematicians of eternity, keepers of a calendar, written not on papyrus, but in the firmament itself? The truth is lost. We can only stand where they once stood, look up at the same stars, and wonder. The Egyptians gave us more than pyramids, more than temples, more than golden tombs. They gave us time, a way to measure the passing days, a way to count the seasons, a way to understand the cycle of life and death. Every clock on your wall, every calendar on your desk, every New Year's countdown, all of it, echoes of a civilization that looked to the stars and listened. And so tonight, as you drift into sleep, picture the priests of Karnak, eyes raised to the eastern sky, the desert quiet, the people waiting, and there, a flicker, a star, Sirius rising, the opening of the year, the moment when time itself was reborn. Sleep now, as the Egyptians once did, under the same sky, with the same stars, with the same endless rhythm of the universe. The curved blade, story of the sickle. Let us begin with silence. The silence before the day begins, the silence before the first foot touches the field, the silence broken only by the sound of the river, the whisper of reeds, and the beating of a single heart. Now imagine the horizon, a band of pale orange bleeding into the dark night sky, the stars fading one by one, as if extinguished by an unseen hand. The Nile still glimmers, a long ribbon of silver cutting across the valley, and then, out of that silence, a sound begins. Not the cry of birds, not the murmur of priests, but something softer, something steadier. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of a curved blade, the sickle. It looks simple, doesn't it? A wooden handle, a blade set along its edge, no gold, no jewels, no carvings of gods. But this tool, this humble curve of wood and stone, and later, copper and bronze, was the heartbeat of Egypt. Without it, there was no harvest. Without harvest, there was no bread. Without bread, there was no kingdom. The pyramids may dazzle the eye, the temples may command the desert, but all of them, every block, every statue, every god carved in stone, owed their existence to the sickle. Picture the farmers now, men bent low, their bodies strong but weary, their hands rough, calloused from years of work. Each grip on the sickle is sure, practiced, each swing is steady, precise. Women move behind them, gathering bundles of grain, tying them with rope, stacking them high. Children dart between the rows, laughing, helping in small ways, their voices like bright sparks in the golden sea. And priests, their linen robes gleaming in the sun, stand at the edge of the fields. Their lips move in prayers to the gods, to Ra for the sun, to Osiris for the soil, to Hapi for the floods. This is no small act. This is not just farming. This is ritual. This is survival. The sickle is the hand of the people. The sickle is the hand of the gods. And what a sound it must have been. Not loud, not grand, but endless. A rhythm that went on for hours, for days, for weeks. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of stalks bending, snapping, falling. The sound of life gathered in armfuls. The sound of Egypt feeding itself. It was music, but a music only the land could understand. Archaeologists have found these sickles, in fields long abandoned, in tombs sealed for millennia, in the hands of mummies who carried them into eternity. Think about that, a farmer buried with his sickle, because even in death, he would need to harvest. Even in the afterlife, he would need bread, and to have bread, he would need this blade. A king might carry gold into the tomb, a queen might carry jewelry, but a farmer carried his sickle. For him, this was the true treasure. The earliest sickles were made of flint, sharp chips set into grooves, held fast with resin, heavy, clumsy, but sharp enough to cut. Later, the Egyptians mastered copper, and then bronze. The curve grew cleaner, the edge grew brighter, the harvest grew faster. Each season brought a new perfection. Each year, the sickle sang a little sharper, a little sweeter. But Egypt was never only practical, it was also spiritual. Every tool, every shape, every rhythm was tied to the sacred. Look at the sickle's curve. Does it not mirror the crescent moon? The silver blade in the sky, the bronze blade in the hand. The Egyptians saw this too. To them, the sickle was more than a tool. It was a symbol, a reminder that life is a cycle. The moon waxes and wanes, the crops grow and fall, the sickle cuts, and life renews. Some myths even gave the sickle to the gods. Osiris, lord of the afterlife, was said to carry a curved blade, not to cut wheat, but to cut the souls of men. The sickle fed the living, but it also reminded them that death was never far away. Now imagine a single day. The sun climbs high, the farmers work without pause, their bodies ache, their backs bend, sweat drips into the soil, the fields slowly empty, bundle by bundle, sheaf by sheaf. By evening fires are lit, the smell of bread drifts from ovens, beer foams in jars, the people sing, the harvest is life, and the sickle has brought it home. Tomorrow, they will rise again. Tomorrow, the rhythm will return. Swish, swish, swish. Think of this, without the sickle Egypt starves, without Egypt's bread, there are no pyramids, without pyramids there is no history carved in stone. One curve of wood and bronze held the weight of a civilization. It is humbling, isn't it, to realize that greatness rests not on crowns but on calloused hands, not on golden masks but on simple tools. The sickle did not shine in palaces, it shone in the fields, it shone in the work of millions, and it shone in the eternal rhythm of survival. Even now, in villages far from the Nile, farmers bend low with sickles. The tool has changed little, the curve remains, the rhythm remains. Empires may fall, kings may be forgotten, but the harvest remains, and the sickle, faithful and silent, remains with it. So tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, let your mind wander. See the fields of gold, hear the swish of blades, smell the fresh bread baking in clay ovens, and know this, sometimes the simplest objects carry the greatest weight. Sometimes the humblest inventions feed the mightiest empires. The curved blade, the sickle, the tool that carved out eternity. Hidden tombs of the Valley of the Kings. Beneath the golden cliffs of western Thebes, there lies a silence so deep, it feels as if the desert itself is holding its breath. To the eye, it is only a valley, ridges of limestone, dusty slopes cut by dry ravines. The sun falls harsh upon it. The wind carries only sand. But beneath this silence, beneath this rock, lies a world unseen. The Valley of the Kings, the resting place of Egypt's pharaohs, a hidden city of the dead, a place where the walls themselves whisper secrets. Imagine yourself standing there, the hot wind brushing against your skin. The cliffs rise around you like the walls of a fortress. There are no pyramids here, no towering monuments, no pointed stones reaching for the heavens. Why? Because pyramids were too visible, too vulnerable. For centuries, robbers had plundered them, breaking open tombs, stealing gold, scattering the bones of kings. So the pharaohs chose another way. They chose secrecy. They chose the hidden valley. Each tomb is invisible at first glance, a cut in the rock, a doorway half buried in sand. But step inside, and the silence changes. The coolness of the stone embraces you. The air grows heavy, as if carrying the weight of centuries. The passage slopes downward, torchlight flickers along the walls, and there, paintings come alive. The walls are not blank, they are filled with color. Deep yellows, fiery reds, vivid blues, and the darkest of blacks. Scenes stretch endlessly. Gods with animal heads, boats sailing through night skies, pharaohs standing before Osiris, hieroglyphs marching like eternal prayers. These are not decorations, they are instructions, maps for the dead. The pharaoh, lying in his sarcophagus, would look upon these walls and know the path through the afterlife. He would see the sun god Ra, sailing his boat through the 12 hours of night. He would face the trials of fire and water. He would pass the guardians of gates. And if he followed the words, if he remembered the spells, he would rise with the dawn. He would be reborn. Think of the artists who painted these walls, not hurried workers, but masters chosen for a sacred task. They ground minerals into powder, malachite for green, lapis lazuli for blue, ochre for red. They mixed them with egg, with gum, with water. Each stroke was prayer, each figure was eternity. By candlelight, they worked for years. Long corridors, deep chambers, every inch covered with life and death. And then, when the pharaoh was laid to rest, the tomb was sealed. The doors were closed with stone. The valley returned to silence. But silence is never permanent. Robbers came, some within years, some centuries later. They broke seals, smashed jars, tore wrappings from mummies. Yet not all was lost. Some tombs remained hidden. Some chambers escaped notice. Some secrets slept undisturbed for over 3,000 years, until modern eyes found them. Picture 1922. A man named Howard Carter stands before a sealed doorway. The tomb of Tutankhamun. The sand is cleared, the plaster is broken, and for the first time in centuries, the torchlight enters. Carter peers inside. He sees golden beds shaped like animals, chariots gleaming with bronze, chests overflowing with jewelry, and beyond it all, the golden mask of a boy king. "Can you see anything?" someone whispers. Carter breathes slowly. Yes, wonderful things. But Tutankhamun's tomb was not alone. KV5, the tomb of Ramses II's sons, a labyrinth of corridors, more than 100 chambers. KV17, the tomb of Seti I, its walls painted with scenes so vivid, it feels as if the gods still walk there. KV62, Tutankhamun, a spark of gold in the desert's silence. Each discovery is not just archaeology, it is resurrection. The valley awakens, and the kings speak again. But let us not rush, let us linger here. Let us walk slowly down these painted halls. Look closer at the walls. The colors are still alive, the figures still walk. Here is Anubis, jackal-headed, guardian of the dead. Here is Nut, goddess of the sky, arching her starry body above the world. Here is Ra, his sun disk blazing. They are not just painted, they are present. The tomb is not a room, it is a universe. And the deeper you walk, the more the silence grows, until you reach the burial chamber. There, the air is still. The sarcophagus waits, stone carved with hieroglyphs, the body once wrapped in linen, now perhaps long gone. But you feel it, don't you? The weight of presence, the sense that the king is not far away, that even now, his spirit walks the corridors, following the stars, sailing the river of night. The Valley of the Kings is not only about death, it is about time. Time stretched across stone, time painted in colors that refuse to fade, time sealed in darkness, waiting for light to find it again. And you, standing there in imagination, are part of that time. You are walking where pharaohs walked. You are breathing where priests once whispered. You are standing in a silence that has lasted for 3,000 years. So close your eyes. Let the torches flicker in your mind. Let the painted gods walk before you. Let the silence wrap around you like linen on a mummy. And remember this, the Valley of the Kings is not truly silent. It is only waiting. Waiting for us to listen. Waiting for us to wonder. Waiting for us to dream. The Ankh, symbol of life. In the vast legacy of ancient Egypt, where pyramids rise from the desert and colossal statues gaze across the Nile, there is one symbol that transcends stone and survives in a way even monuments cannot. It is not a temple or a tomb, not a treasure of gold or jewels, but a simple shape carved endlessly into walls, pressed into amulets, and painted across sarcophagi. The Ankh, a looped cross, graceful in form and utterly mysterious in meaning, known today as the symbol of life. The first time you see it in an Egyptian temple, it seems almost ordinary. But the more you notice, the more it appears everywhere, repeated again and again, as if the Egyptians were leaving behind a reminder, a whisper, a coded message for all generations that followed. The gods themselves are shown holding ankhs, not for decoration, but as instruments of power. In carvings on temple walls, a deity presses an ankhs gently to the lips of a pharaoh, and in that moment, the message becomes clear. The ankh is breath. It is vitality. It is the spark that moves the chest, the promise that life does not end even in death. Scholars have debated the meaning of this form for centuries, but perhaps that is the magic of it. Some interpret the loop as the rising sun, a perfect circle of renewal, the arms as the horizon, and the stem as the Nile flowing through the land. Others see in it the image of creation itself, the loop as the womb, the vertical shaft as the line of descent, the horizontal arms as the outstretched union of male and female. And still others believe it was designed as a key, not just in metaphor, but a literal symbol of the key to hidden doors, doors that open between worlds. It is not difficult to imagine the scene. A priest of Karnak, clothed in white linen, raises an ankh during ritual, and the temple fills with incense smoke, drifting like mist over stone floors. He lifts the sign before a statue of a god, and in the candlelight, it glimmers faintly, as though it has absorbed some of the divine energy it is meant to represent. The people gathered watch in silence, believing that in this gesture, the invisible breath of life is renewed and shared between God and mortal. The ankh was not reserved for kings alone. Pharaohs carried it proudly, yes, and queens wore it in gold and silver, but ordinary Egyptians too cherished its power, pressing small ankhs of wood, ivory, or faience into their palms, wearing them as pendants, burying them in tombs. To hold it was to hold protection, a reassurance that the cycle of life and death would continue. To wear it was to invite not just survival but renewal. Even in the tombs, where paintings covered walls and scenes of the afterlife, the ankh appears with striking frequency. A god reaches out to the deceased, not with empty hands but with an ankh extended toward their mouth, promising them breath in the world beyond. It was a symbol that traveled with them into eternity, just as it had walked beside them in life. What makes the ankh so extraordinary is its endurance. The pyramids weather and crumble, the temples are buried in sand, the mummies lie in their glass cases, silent and still, but the ankh remains as vivid today as it was 3,000 years ago. The looped cross has outlived dynasties, religions, and empires. It has crossed oceans, been adopted by new cultures, and even today you can find it carved in jewelry shops, painted in books, or inked as tattoos on those who seek its ancient resonance. In truth, the ankh's power lies in its mystery. It is simple enough to be remembered, yet complex enough never to be fully explained. Was it a map of the cosmos, a union of opposites, a key to another dimension, or all of these at once? Perhaps it was designed to remain mysterious, a symbol not of knowledge that can be explained, but of truths that can only be felt. Stand in front of a wall of hieroglyphs, sun beating on your shoulders, wind carrying sand across the desert, and your eyes are drawn again and again to the same sign. The Ankh, not large, not dominant, but insistent. It is there beside gods, in the hands of kings, above offerings of bread and beer, in the carvings of festivals and funerals. It follows you across the walls, whispering with each repetition, life, 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 and perhaps that is why it has endured while so much else has faded. The Egyptians were masters of building in stone, of preserving bodies for eternity, of charting the stars with mathematical precision. But above all, they were obsessed with life, how to preserve it, how to renew it, how to continue it beyond the grave. The Ankh is not a monument of stone or a text on papyrus. It is a symbol that embodies that obsession, surviving precisely because it was small enough to be carried, simple enough to be remembered, and powerful enough to be believed. Today, more than 3,000 years later, it is still here with us. The Ankh remains in our jewelry, in our art, in our imagination, long after the gods it once served have faded into myth. The Ankh continues to carry the same message it whispered to the Egyptians, that life is eternal, that breath is sacred, that the cycle never truly ends. The Ankh, the symbol of life, the key that unlocked eternity, and perhaps, even now, it still unlocks something deep within us. The weighing of the heart ceremony. In the shadowed halls of eternity, where God sat in judgment, and the souls of mortals trembled, the Egyptians imagined a trial unlike any other. It was not a court of human kings, but of cosmic law. No witnesses were called, no lawyers spoke, no bribes could be offered. Only one thing mattered, the weight of your heart. This ceremony, the weighing of the heart, stood at the very center of Egyptian belief in the afterlife. To the Egyptians, the heart was not just an organ, it was the seat of thought, memory, conscience, and emotion. While modern science gives those roles to the brain, the Egyptians believed the brain was little more than useless matter, often scooped away during mummification. But the heart, the heart carried the truth of your life. Every act, every word, every secret, every sin, it was all written there, invisible to mortal eyes, but plain as day before the gods. Picture this: a man has died, his body lies embalmed, wrapped in linen, placed carefully in a painted coffin. But his journey is not yet over. For the Egyptians believed that death was only the beginning of a long passage through the underworld, the Duat, where monsters prowled and gates demanded passwords, where lakes of fire burned and serpents coiled in endless night. The soul must wander, uncertain, vulnerable, and at last, at the very center of that dark journey, it must arrive at the Hall of Two Truths. Here, in the grand chamber of judgment, the scene unfolds. Tall columns rise into shadow. The walls glow with hieroglyphs, painted by priests who knew the ritual by heart, and in the center stands a great scale, vast and gleaming. On one side rests the feather of Matat, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. A single feather, light as air, yet heavier than gold, for it embodies all that is just and right in the universe. On the other side will be placed the heart of the dead. The soul trembles as the gods assemble. There is Osiris, lord of the underworld, seated on a throne of green and black, crowned with the tall white crown of Upper Egypt, watching in silence. Behind him Isis and Nephthys, his sisters, stand like guardians. Before the scales, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, readies his writing palette, ready to record the verdict with precise, eternal strokes. And nearby waits Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, silent and watchful, his dark eyes fixed on the heart that is about to be tested. But there is one more figure lurking close, and its presence fills the soul with dread. Ammit, the devourer. She crouches beside the scales, jaws wide, her body a monstrous fusion of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, the three most dangerous beasts of Egypt. She waits, slavering, ready to consume the heart if it fails. For in this trial there is no appeal, no second chance. If your heart is heavy with sin, it is fed to Ammit, and you are erased from existence. No afterlife, no rebirth, no name, no memory, only eternal nothingness. The moment arrives. The heart is placed on the scale, beating no longer, yet full of all the weight of a life lived. Across from it, the feather of Ma'at rests, glowing faintly in the torchlight. Silence fills the hall. Every god watches. Anubis adjusts the beam of the scale, and the soul holds its breath. Will the heart balance? Will it rise lighter than truth, or sink under the burden of lies? This was not merely myth. To the Egyptians, this judgment was as real as the rising of the sun. Their entire lives were lived with this moment in mind. Every oath sworn, every act of charity, every cruelty, every betrayal, all would be revealed here. It was not wealth or rank that decided your fate, but honesty, compassion, and balance. Even the mightiest pharaoh could fall if his heart was heavy with wrongdoing. Even the humblest farmer could rise into paradise if his heart was pure. and so they prepared. The Book of the Dead, written on papyrus and buried with the dead, provided spells and incantations to guide the soul through the dangers of the duat and into the hall of judgment. Among its most famous passages is the negative confession, 42 declarations spoken before the gods, each beginning with the same defiant phrase, I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not killed, I have not caused suffering. Line after line, the soul proclaims its innocence, hoping to lighten the burden of the heart before it is weighed. But words alone could not deceive the scale. That was the brilliance of this ritual. The heart itself could not lie. Even if a person hid their sins in life, even if they fooled the living, the heart would reveal the truth. It would weigh heavy if guilt was there. It would float light if virtue had guided the soul. Imagine for a moment, standing there yourself, the gods gathered, their faces carved from eternity, the feather glowing in its perfection, the scale creaking softly as your heart is set in place. You cannot speak, cannot run, cannot hide. All you can do is wait as the balance tilts, as the truth of your life is revealed in silence. For those found worthy, the reward was beyond imagination. The soul passed onward into the presence of Osiris, into the blessed fields of Aru, the Egyptian paradise. There, in fields of golden grain stretching to the horizon, the soul could farm and feast forever, reunited with loved ones, free from pain, embraced by the eternal sun. For those found unworthy, there was no torment, no hellfire, no eternal punishment. There was something worse, annihilation. Amit devoured the heart, and the soul ceased to exist. To the Egyptians, this was the ultimate fear, not pain, but erasure, to be forgotten, to vanish utterly, without name or memory. It is a haunting vision, and yet a profoundly moral one. Unlike many ancient religions, the Egyptians placed ultimate value not on ritual alone, not on sacrifice or blind faith, but on the balance of one's actions. To live justly, to speak truth, to act with kindness. These were the keys to eternity, and so the weighing of the heart became more than a ceremony of the dead. It was a guide for the living. Every day was a preparation for that moment in the Hall of Two Truths. Every choice, no matter how small, added weight to the heart or lightened it. Life itself was the trial, and the final weighing only revealed what had always been true. Even today, the image endures, painted on papyri, carved into tomb walls, displayed in museums. The scene of the scale, the feather, and the waiting gods still speaks across 3,000 years. It whispers the same question the Egyptians once asked themselves. How heavy is your heart? Perhaps that is why this ceremony still fascinates us. Because in its silence, in its imagery of balance and truth, it captures something timeless. It reminds us that no wealth or power can escape death, and that in the end, what truly matters is the weight of our choices, the honesty of our lives, the purity of our hearts. The weighing of the heart was not merely a story of death, it was a story of how to live, and in that way, across millennia, it still lives within us. The cult of Ra, god of the sun. There are gods who whisper in the dark. There are gods who rule in silence, hidden in tombs, waiting in the shadows of the underworld. And then, there is Ra, the blazing sun, the eye of heaven, the unblinking fire that no man could ignore, no creature could escape. Ra, the god of the sun, was not merely worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. He was the center of their world. His rising marked the beginning of life each day. His setting carried them into night. His power was written into the desert sands, painted across the fertile valley of the Nile, etched into every shadow, every crop, every heartbeat. To speak of Ra is to speak of light itself. The Egyptians looked to the eastern horizon each morning and saw more than the dawn. They saw the rebirth of a god. As the golden disk of the sun crept above the palm groves and temples, they believed Ra was sailing across the sky in his celestial boat, bringing warmth and life to all creation. His journey was endless, tireless, eternal. At dusk, when the sun dipped beyond the western horizon, Ra did not rest. No, he descended into the duat, the underworld, sailing through caverns of darkness, guarded by serpents, challenged by monsters, stalked by the great serpent ape, embodiment of chaos. Every night was a battle. Every dawn was a triumph. When the sun rose again, it was proof that Ra had conquered the night, that order had triumphed over chaos, that the universe itself had been preserved for another day. This cycle of death and rebirth, of struggle and renewal, was more than a cosmic story. It was the heartbeat of Egyptian life. Farmers planted with the rising sun. Priests prayed at noon when the light was strongest. Temples were aligned with the path of the sun, their shadows moving like silent clocks across the stone. The calendar, the festivals, the rituals, all were tied to Ra's eternal voyage. But Ra was not just the sun in the sky, he was creation itself. In the earliest myths, it was Ra who rose from the waters of chaos, the primeval ocean called Nun. From his very being, he called the world into existence. He spoke, and the earth emerged. He wept, and his tears became the first humans. The gods themselves sprang from his light. Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture, Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. From Ra's lineage, the great Ennead of Heliopolis was born, and through them the world was shaped. Imagine the awe this must have inspired. For the Egyptians, Ra was not just a god among gods, he was the source, the father, the giver of life. His cult was older than the pyramids, older than most kingdoms on earth. By the time the first pharaohs ruled along the Nile, Ra was already there, blazing above, his disk carved on stone, his name sung in hymns. And yet Ra was not distant. His power flowed through kings, through temples, through every breath of the land. Pharaohs called themselves the sons of Ra, claiming divine descent from the sun god himself. To rule Egypt was to carry Ra's authority, to be the earthly vessel of his cosmic order, his Ma'at. Temples dedicated to Ra rose in Heliopolis, the city of the sun, where towering obelisks pointed skyward like frozen rays of light. Priests there performed rituals to renew Ra's power, offerings of food, drink, incense, and sacred hymns. But more than anything, they offered devotion, the daily recognition that without Ra, the world would wither. The cult spread wide. In later dynasties, Ra was fused with other gods to form powerful combinations. Ra Harakti, merging with Horus, the falcon god of the sky, symbolized the sun's rising strength. Amun-Ra, joining with the hidden god Amun of Thebes, became a supreme deity, worshipped as king of the gods, his temples stretching from Karnak to Luxor. Each union expanded his reach, making him not just the sun, but the very idea of divine kingship, of universal order, of unseen power, and visible flame. But what makes the cult of Ra so fascinating is not just the grandeur of temples or the poetry of myths, it is the intimacy with which ordinary Egyptians lived under his gaze. For them, the sunrise was not just a spectacle, it was reassurance, proof that life would continue, proof that darkness could be overcome, proof that the eternal struggle between order and chaos was once again won. At dawn, people might whisper prayers to the sun as it climbed the horizon. Farmers would pause in their fields to thank Ra for the warmth that ripened their grain. Mothers might teach their children to raise their hands to the sky, honoring the blazing disk that gave them life. And as the day turned to dusk, as shadows lengthened across the valley, there was also fear. Would Ra defeat the monsters of the night once more? Would the sun return, or would the world sink into endless dark? This daily rhythm bound every soul in Egypt to Ra's voyage. His story was their story. His survival was their survival. The myths tell us more. Ra was not only worshipped, he was challenged. In the legend of Isis, the goddess of magic, it is said she tricked Ra into revealing his secret name, a word of ultimate power. With it she gained mastery over his divine essence, passing it to her son Horus. This myth reflects a deeper truth. Even the sun, mighty as it was, could be questioned, tested, absorbed into the larger fabric of Egyptian belief. But Ra endured. His cult lasted for millennia. His disk was carved into tombs, painted above sarcophagi, etched into amulets worn for protection. Even in death, Egyptians sought Ra's light, praying that he would guide their souls through the darkness of the Duat and into rebirth, just as he himself was reborn each morning. Stand for a moment in the desert, as the Egyptians once did. Imagine the sky glowing red at dawn, the horizon aflame. The sand warms beneath your feet, as light spreads across the valley. The river glitters, temples gleam, and the air fills with life. This is Ra's gift. And then, as night falls, imagine the stars flickering above, the fear of darkness pressing close. Somewhere, far beyond sight, Ra battles serpents and shadows. Somewhere, in the depths of the underworld, the balance of the universe hangs on his strength. And when the first light breaks again, when the horizon glows gold once more, relief floods through you. The god has returned. Chaos has been defeated. Order remains. That was the rhythm of Egypt. That was the faith that carried them for 3,000 years. The cult of Ra was not a superstition, not simply a set of rituals. It was a worldview, a way of living in harmony with cycles of day and night, life and death, order and chaos. It was a story written in light, repeated endlessly in the sky, reflected in the hearts of those who believed. Even today the sun rises as it always has. We no longer call it Ra, yet the mystery remains. For when you stand in the early morning, when golden light spills across the horizon, you too feel something ancient stir within you. The same awe, the same reverence, the same recognition that life itself is bound to the journey of the sun. Ra has not vanished. His name may be forgotten, his temples fallen to ruin, but his presence endures every dawn, every day, every sunset. His cult is older than empires, older than monuments, older than the pyramids themselves. The Egyptians saw him as eternal, and perhaps they were right. For as long as the sun shines, the cult of Ra still burns. Osiris and the promise of resurrection. Imagine walking through a silent temple, the air is heavy with incense. Torches flicker against walls carved with gods, and in the center of the hall stands a tall, green-skinned figure carved from stone. A crown rests upon his head. A crook and flail cross his chest. His eyes gaze forward, calm, eternal, unblinking. This is Osiris, lord of the underworld, judge of the dead. But also something more, the god who promised that death was not the end. The story of Osiris is not a simple one. It is one of betrayal, murder, love, and resurrection. It is the myth that shaped how the Egyptians saw life itself, and how they faced the darkness that waits beyond the grave. Osiris was once a king, not just a god, but a ruler who walked among men. He brought law, taught farming, showed people how to live with order and peace. His kingdom flourished under his hand, but where there is light, there is always shadow. Osiris's brother Set grew jealous. Set was chaos, storms, violence, everything Osiris was not, and in his heart envy festered. One day Set devised a plan. He had a beautiful chest made, crafted to fit only Osiris's body. At a great feast, Set brought out the chest and declared, "Whosoever lies within this chest, it shall be theirs." One by one the guests tried, but none fit, until Osiris lay down inside, and when he did, Set's trap snapped shut. The lid was sealed. The chest was nailed, weighted, cast into the Nile. The god king was gone. The world fell silent. Without Osiris, the land withered. Chaos spread. But the story did not end there. Isis, the devoted wife of Osiris, searched endlessly. Through marshes, through rivers, through forests, she hunted for her husband. Her love was unwavering, her grief endless. Finally she found him. The chest lodged in the roots of a tree. She hid him, wept over him, sang her laments to the heavens. But Set discovered this, and in rage, he tore Osiris apart, scattering his body across the land of Egypt. And so Isis searched again. She gathered the pieces, one by one, with the help of her sister Nephthys. Each fragment found, each wound wrapped, she reassembled him, piece by piece, and with her magic, breathed life into him once more. Osiris rose again, not to walk among the living, but to rule the dead. From that moment, Osiris became lord of the underworld. He sat upon a great throne, deep in the Duat, and every soul that died in Egypt would stand before him. But here is where the story grows profound, for Osiris did not simply rule as a tyrant of shadows. He offered something the world had never known before: resurrection. The Egyptians believed that just as Osiris had died and been reborn, so too could they. If they lived with Ma'at, truth, justice, balance, their hearts would be light, and when they stood before Osiris in the hall of judgment, their hearts would be weighed against the feather of truth. If the scales balanced, they would pass into the field of reeds, a paradise, a mirror of Egypt itself. Green fields, cool rivers, endless harvests, eternal peace. If not, their hearts would be devoured by Ammit, and their souls cast into nothingness. Think of the comfort this gave. For thousands of years, people lived under the desert sun, worked the fields, endured hardship, feared death. But because of Osiris, they believed death was not the end, that beyond the tomb, there was a second life waiting, that the grave was not silence, but a doorway. This belief shaped Egypt more than any pyramid, more than any temple. It was why bodies were mummified, preserved for eternity, why tombs were filled with food, tools, amulets, treasures, not as symbols, but as real provisions for life after death. It was why prayers were written on papyrus, why spells were spoken, why coffins were painted with stars and suns. Every ritual of Egypt was, in some way, tied to Osiris. Osiris was not just worshipped in death, but celebrated in life. Festivals in his honor were held, reenactments of his death and resurrection staged, with priests taking the roles of Isis, Nephthys, Horus, Set. The people watched, mourned, rejoiced, reliving the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. To them, Osiris was hope itself. He was proof that life continued. He was the promise that their loved ones, their ancestors, their children, all rested in green fields beyond the veil of death. Even the pharaohs, mighty as they were, saw themselves as reflections of Osiris. In life, the king was Horus, ruling on earth. In death, he became Osiris, ruling below. The cycle of kingship itself mirrored the eternal story, one ruler dying, another rising, just as day followed night, just as the Nile's flood followed the drought, just as Osiris rose again from darkness. Today, if you walk through the Valley of the Kings, if you look upon the paintings in the tombs, you will see Osiris everywhere. Green-skinned, eternal, watching, his image painted on sarcophagi, his figure carved in stone, his name written in prayers. He was more than myth. He was the foundation of Egyptian faith, and perhaps that is why his story still speaks to us today, because beneath the gods, and rituals, and symbols, there lies something deeply human, the longing to believe that death is not the end, that love can conquer loss, that life can bloom again after darkness. Osiris was their answer, their hope, their promise of resurrection. And maybe, in some way, he is ours too. Horus, the falcon god of kingship. Look up at the sky. The desert sun burns bright, and circling above it, wings outstretched, is a falcon, sharp-eyed, swift, regal. This bird of prey is not just an animal in ancient Egypt, it is a god, a protector, a king. This is Horus, the falcon-headed god, the eternal rival of Set, the son of Isis and Osiris, the very embodiment of kingship and divine authority. To speak of Horus is to speak of Egypt itself, because for over 3,000 years, every pharaoh was considered the living Horus on earth. Every crown worn, every law passed, every temple raised, all was done in his name. The story of Horus begins with tragedy. It begins with the death of Osiris, his father, murdered by his jealous brother Set. Osiris, torn apart, scattered, resurrected only to rule the underworld. Isis, the devoted wife, gathered his body, breathed life back into him, and from this union, Horus was conceived. But Horus was not born into peace. He was born into war. A child of vengeance, a child of destiny, hidden by his mother in the marshes of the Nile Delta, raised in secrecy, away from the wrath of Set. Imagine the scene. Isis clutching her infant close as reeds sway in the water. Priests whispering protective spells, the goddess summoning scorpions to guard her child. Every day a struggle to keep him alive, for Set knew that if the boy grew, if the son of Osiris became strong, his own rule would be challenged. And so Horus grew. Not just a boy, but a falcon. Not just a falcon, but a god. He became a warrior, and he would not rest until justice was done. The battles between Horus and Set are legendary, not one fight, but many. Years of combat, trials and contests that filled the myths of Egypt. One story tells of a race across the Nile, where both gods built boats. Set, with his brute strength, carved his from solid stone. Horus, clever and cunning, built his from wood, but covered it with plaster so it looked like stone. When Set's heavy boat sank, Horus's vessel glided smoothly across the waters. The gods laughed, but the rivalry burned on. Another tale tells of their duel in the desert. Set struck out Horus's eye, tearing it from his face, but the eye was restored by Thoth, the god of wisdom. This eye, the eye of Horus, became one of the most sacred symbols in all of Egypt. It represented healing, protection, wholeness. Every amulet, every tomb painting, every offering vessel carried its mark. The eye was not just an image, it was power itself. But the story does not end with battles, for in the end, Horus did not simply fight for himself, he fought for Egypt, for the principle of Ma'at, balance, justice, truth. Where Set represented chaos, Horus was order. Where Set was the storm, Horus was the clear sky. Finally, after endless struggle, Horus stood before the gods. The tribunal was called, a divine court, and the judgment was given. Horus was declared the rightful heir of Osiris. He was crowned with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. The throne was his, and from that day forward, every king of Egypt was the living Horus. But here lies the beauty of this myth. Horus is not just a warrior god. He is not just a falcon flying high. He is the bridge between heaven and earth, between gods and men. Look at his image carved on temple walls. A falcon with a crown, arms stretched, wings wide, protecting the pharaoh beneath. The king was Horus in flesh, his authority divine, his rule eternal. Even in death, the pharaoh became Osiris, but in life, he was Horus, guiding, ruling, soaring. The cycle never ended. Father to son, death to rebirth, Osiris to Horus, Horus to Osiris. The cult of Horus spread across Egypt. At Edfu, his great temple rose, one of the best preserved to this day. Its walls tell the story of his battle with Set. They show Horus sailing, fighting, crowned in glory. Every year, rituals were held, retelling the myth, bringing the people into the eternal struggle. And beyond Edfu, Horus was worshipped in many forms, sometimes as a child, Harpocrates, the young god with a finger to his lips, symbol of silence and mystery, sometimes as the elder Horus, the falcon soaring over the sky, sometimes merged with Ra, the sun god, becoming Ra-Horikti, the falcon of the horizon, the rising sun, the promise of each new dawn. Think about what this meant to ordinary Egyptians. Every morning, as the sun rose, they saw Horus in the sky. Every king they served, they believed, was Horus on earth. Every amulet they wore, carved with the eye of Horus, was a shield against sickness, danger, evil. The god was not distant. He was present in their daily lives, woven into their survival, their faith, their identity. Even today, thousands of years later, the falcon of Horus still soars in our imagination. The eye of Horus still appears in jewelry, tattoos, artwork, a symbol of protection that has never lost its power. And the story of Horus and Set, order against chaos, light against darkness, truth against violence, is still our story. It is the struggle of every society, every age, every person. Horus reminds us that justice may falter, but it will rise again, that the sun may set, but it always returns, that no matter how long the night, the falcon will soar at dawn. So when you next see the image of a falcon, sharp eyes gazing down, wings cutting the sky, remember, this is more than a bird. This is Horus, the eternal king, the god of kingship, the falcon who still flies over Egypt, carrying with him the promise that order will always rise from chaos. Isis, mother of magic. She is a mother, she is a goddess. She is the weaver of spells, the healer of wounds, the protector of kings. She is Isis, one of the most beloved, most enduring, most worshipped goddesses in the history of Egypt. To speak her name is to speak of devotion. To whisper her story is to uncover a tale of grief, of love, of triumph, and of magic. For Isis was not only the wife of Osiris, nor only the mother of Horus, she was the force that bound the gods together, the voice of compassion in a world of chaos, the eternal protector of the living and the dead. Imagine the statues of Isis. Graceful, serene, carved in black basalt, or painted in dazzling colors, she wears the throne-shaped crown upon her head, because she is not only a goddess, but the very embodiment of the throne itself. Every pharaoh who sat upon Egypt's throne did so through her blessing. Without Isis, there was no kingship. Without Isis, there was no Egypt. The story of Isis begins with her marriage to Osiris. He was the just king, the god of life and fertility. Together they ruled in harmony, spreading civilization, teaching the people agriculture, worship and law. But jealousy rose in the heart of Set, Osiris's brother. In one of the most famous myths of Egypt, Set lured Osiris into a coffin, sealed it with lead, and cast it into the Nile. Osiris was lost. The world fell into darkness, the crops withered, the land wept. But Isis did not weep forever. She searched. She wandered across Egypt, across marsh and desert, seeking the body of her beloved. At last she found him, but Set was not finished. He tore Osiris into 14 pieces and scattered them across the land. And here lies the heart of Isis's story, for she did not give up. Piece by piece, she gathered his body, she reassembled him, wrapped him, restored him with her magic, and with her wings she breathed life into him once more. From this miracle, Horus was conceived. From this act, Osiris was reborn, not to rule the living, but to reign in the underworld. And from this moment, Isis became more than a goddess. She became the greatest sorceress of all. Think about what this meant for the Egyptian people. They saw in Isis not only a divine queen, but a figure of absolute loyalty, a wife who would cross the world for her husband, a mother who would fight gods to protect her son, a healer who could restore life from death. When Horus was born, Isis raised him in secret. She hid him in the marshes of the Nile Delta, guarded by scorpions and spells. Every day she whispered incantations to protect him. Every night she watched the stars, praying that Set would not find him. She was not only a goddess, she was every mother who ever held a child and feared for his life. And when Horus grew, when he stood ready to face Set in battle, it was Isis who guided him. It was Isis who healed his wounds, who restored his eye, who gave him strength. The triumph of Horus was the triumph of Isis, for without her he would not have survived. But the power of Isis did not end with the myths. Her worship spread far beyond Egypt. Temples rose in her honor, at Philae, at Abydos, at Beit el-Hagar. Her priests carried her image down the Nile in sacred processions. Sailors called upon her as the mistress of the seas, protector of voyages. Mothers prayed to her for the health of their children. Farmers asked for her blessing on the land. And in time, the cult of Isis spread across the Mediterranean. The Greeks embraced her, calling her a goddess of wisdom and magic. The Romans built temples for her as far away as London and Paris. Her image was painted on walls in Pompeii. Her hymns were sung in Rome. She became one of the most worshipped goddesses of the ancient world, her influence lasting centuries after the fall of Egypt's own temples. Isis was not just a goddess of love and loyalty, she was also a goddess of power. One story tells of how she tricked Ra, the great sun god himself. She wanted to learn his secret name, for to know a god's true name was to command his essence. She fashioned a serpent from clay and venom, placed it on Ra's path, and when it bit him, he writhed in pain. None of the gods could heal him, but Isis approached, saying, "Reveal to me your secret name, and I will cure you." Ra resisted, but the venom burned deeper. Finally he surrendered. He whispered his true name, and with this, Isis healed him. From that day forward, her magic was greater than even the sun gods. She was not only the mother of Horus, not only the wife of Osiris, she was the mistress of all spells, the queen of the gods. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine being an ancient Egyptian farmer, standing in a simple mud brick house, your child feverish and weak. What do? You whisper a prayer to Isis. You place an amulet with her image above the bed. You recite the spells of protection that her priests taught. Because to you she is not distant, she is here. She is a mother, like you. She understands suffering, she heals, she guards, she restores. Even in death, Egyptians believed she stood by them. In tomb paintings, Isis spreads her wings over the coffin, sheltering the soul for its journey to the afterlife. Her presence was a promise that the dead would not be alone, that love and magic would guide them beyond the veil. And today, Isis has never truly vanished. Her image appears in art, in literature, in the quiet fascination we still feel when we speak her name. Some scholars even see echoes of Isis in later traditions, in the image of the devoted mother, in the icon of compassion that transcends death. She is eternal, not just as a goddess carved in stone, but as an idea that love can heal, that loyalty can conquer death, that magic is born from devotion. So when we speak of Isis, mother of magic, we are not speaking only of ancient Egypt. We are speaking of the eternal human need for hope, for protection, for the belief that somewhere, in the darkest night, a mother's wings still spread wide, guarding us, guiding us, leading us back to life. She is Isis. She is magic. She is love made divine.